And then we will see if my keyboard is so loud. Everybody makes fun of me. I love mechanical keyboards. I always try to mute myself before I type like a paragraph because I don't want people to die from it. Yeah. All right. I'm asking if there's a delay. So I always have to be like, can you hear me? Is anybody there? And then when they start saying yes, we can move on. Because you start talking and then they're like, we can't hear anybody. What the hell are you doing? Waiting. Say no. Yeah, it's up. It says 46 people already, but no replies yet. Come on. Where are they at? Yeah, this is a while. People are still coming on, but no one has said, oh, where are the people? Well, dang. This is strange. Do I just start talking? What in the hell? Yeah, normally people reply immediately. Oh well. I say we start instead of just wondering if they're going to reply. So I would say we'll give a quick introduction. You are Jeff Evans of Evans Tuning, and you also do the Evans Performance Academy, like online videos to coach through all sorts of tuning and things. I don't think you do any like religious videos or anything, dude. Not yet, anyway. And then, did you want to elaborate on that? Like, what else do you have or do? That's awesome. I gotta buy a thing at some point and just watch it for fun. Yeah, there's plenty I don't know about. Like I was messing with a Haltech car the other day and it's just totally different. And I'm like, man, it'd be nice to fast track some of this learning. Yeah, it's hidden all over the place too. And then I guess I always like to start off with what was your first car and how did you get into cars and how did you decide to do this path? Oh man. Hmm. Ah, see? I'm sorry. Someone just said no Jeff audio. See? Not you. They can hear me, but not you. So that's why I like to ask. Yeah. No, it was me. It was me. I had a sound thing. Yeah, I mute everything until we go live, but that's why I always ask. What the hell, guys? Yeah, now we have you up here. Now for sure. I'll ask the guy that messaged me. Ah, yep. Is my chat just busted? Maybe I gotta Oh man, the comments are exploding. What happened? I'm like, this is odd. What the hell isn't working? The comments are literally flying. Still nothing. No Jeff. Why? Why, guys? Now? Let me look at I can hear you. That's what's hilarious. Everyone's like dying. They're just laughing. At least Matt's enjoying himself there. You guys can hear me, right? They're just saying no, Jeff. So that's it's me. It's my broadcast stuff. I have to. So I have you in here. So what the? Let me add. This is why I always like to do this ahead of time. Begin sign language. We hear you, Matt, just not Jeff. That's what I thought. Why, it has the thing here that says desktop audio. What the hell? How about now, guys? Say hello, Jeff. Yeah, I'm not getting oh boy. Why is it being an asshole now? Oh, is it your fault? Can you hear him now? Say hello, Jeff. I'm sorry. Oh, that's coming through the thing. Default? No, that's through the other.
Andrea said that she could hear something. She's listening on the live stream.
Yeah, it's looping back through now. There's got to be a way for me to. How about now? Yeah, that's going through my speakers. Sounds underwater, yes. It's coming out of my... Let's try... Oh! How do I add... Oh my goodness. We're off to a great start. First one of the year, ladies and gentlemen. How do I add... First time back. OBS, why are you broken? Desktop audio default. Apply. What if you try saying hello now? No, I'm not getting... That sounds different. I should be getting... Default. Yeah, but I should be getting... Yeah, I have OBS here, and I have a desktop audio thing, but it's not... Oh. Try now. No, I got... I had something. Yeah, it's just. Oh boy, annoying. Where is. What about now?
Can you hear me?
Oh, I see the thing moving.
Yeah, is it working? Something working?
I can see your thing ticking. Got it.
Is it working now?
Yep. I just had to change like 40 audio options, and we're good. No big
Oh,
deal.
sweet.
How far are we in, kids? 12 minutes to get some audio. We're doing great now. No big deal.
Nice.
It'll work for next time now.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Start over.
All
Ladies and
right.
gentlemen, I have Jeff Evans of Evans Tuning and Evans Tuning Academy. You do online classes for standalones of all walks of life, and you have separate sections for, like I said earlier, like drive-by-wire, specifically for certain ECUs, etc. And then you own Evans Tuning and everything else. Do you want to go into? And I think we went over this, but you said you don't really have anything else to say. That's your primary job. And
Yeah,
then
school's my full-time deal. Still do the tuning on, I still have it, still in tuning, but just not, full time. So
yeah, everyone's like, "What do you do for a living again?"
oh yeah, I tell everybody I have a school and they get all excited, and then I tell them about programming computers and they're like, oh,
Yeah,
and there's just like a complete blank look on the face, just like, yeah, I lost you. All right, never mind.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, guys. It's the first time I was just explaining to you. This is the first time I have to deal with this free conference software because all the other guys shut all their stuff off at like 30 some minutes. So, and what was your first car and how'd you get into cars? That's what we were at before everyone said.
Okay. I had a 1996 Honda Prelude SI, automatic. And it was pretty lame, but I thought it was the hot shit. I put an exhaust on it. It's like a DC Sports exhaust, and put some sweet rims on it.
Nice.
And then I realized that I was like 16, I think, when I got that thing, and I realized it was pretty lame because it was auto. And then the swap, the B series swap started like popping up in like 98, and that was like the new hot thing. And it wasn't like on the East Coast here, you couldn't get anything. Like it wasn't, no one knew anything about it. And I think it was like 99 or 2000, I got a B16 swap, and I found a hatchback, like a 92, 95 style hatchback. And I swapped the motor in it and put a DFI on it, Excel DFI, and got it running, but it ran like shit. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, there was no information. No one, it was a disaster. And I think it was like after 2 or 3 months of trying to get it to run right on the DFI, and everything was DOS based. So you get these like shitty old laptops that are like, total garbage, floppy disk. And
something like a Zenith. That's how you know it's an old laptop.
I think I had the IBM Smart Pad or Smart. What are the ones with the little ball that you push on with like a mouse?
Well,
Like
they actually, people love that, and I've had
Yeah,
some even like 3 years ago, brand new, that still have
they
the
still have it.
little eraser tip in there. Yeah,
Yeah,
some people, they have to have that.
I didn't mind it, but it was like, so it was old school. But we put a Haltech, like a EK9 system, EK6, the old school DOS stuff. I put that on the Civic, got it running right. Then I turboed it, and again had no idea what the hell I was doing, and got it running fairly well. And I went like, this was like 2001, maybe 2002. I went to I don't know if it was Island. I don't know what drag strip it was anymore. It might
That's
have
the one
been
that's closest to us. It's probably 40 minutes from you now.
It was either Maple Grove or Island. I can't remember because
Maple
it was
Grove is
just
where Amish people are, and Island is where the
yeah,
meth heads are.
yeah, yeah. I can't remember the track, but I ended up running like a low 12-second quarter mile, like 120 with the thing, and which was fast for like that time period. And it was right around the time where Honda came out with their it was a stage system, stage 2, 3, and 4. It was like a chip, like a little piggyback module. We put the EEPROM chip in to communicate. So we ditched that. We ditched the Haltech and put the Honda in, put the factory computer back in.
Is that like a
I still
moat where you use an external thing to tune and then you can burn it or something like that?
Similar kind of idea, um, and it ran better with it, probably because it's just easy. It's like a factory ECU, you just like. So we learned that, tuned that, and that was when I was in college. I was going to school for mechanical engineering, and I didn't really want to do that, but I don't know, I figured that was what I needed to do. And I graduated in 2004, and I'd been tuning cars just for like people on the side. I'd meet up with people. We used to use a dyno down in Philly, outside of Philly area. And we used to drive down, we'd like street tune the cars, meet up at the dyno. I'd have like 5 cars meet up there. We, rent out the dyno for a few hours. Really just like doing the pools and just getting them all worked out or whatever. And then I did that for a while and sort of built up kind of like local, everybody kind of knew who I was, and graduated, and I just didn't want to do engineering. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna try to do tuning. I bought the dyno. I bought the dyno pack, and that was like the hub dyno. And people were like, "That thing's stupid. That's the dumbest thing I've ever seen." I'm
I
like, "No, this
remember
thing's great."
I didn't know those existed until I saw yours. And that's
Yeah,
when I remember first coming to your shop for having like 2 or 3 of my friends having Hondas tuned, and it was like a shed somewhere. I can't remember.
it is in the back of So we had there's a guy who did auto body restoration, and he
Yeah.
was a friend of my dad's, and this lady lived up the street from him, and they were like friends with each other, and she had this garage in the back of her house that was facing a cornfield, and it was empty. So
I
we
remember the
rented it.
cornfield.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Everybody does. They came to the shop. We were there for like
So,
7 or 8 years.
one of the questions was like, I remember peeing in the cornfield or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, there was a cornfield behind us, a whole farm. It was great. I mean, the neighbors hated me, and because it wasn't like commercial. So we were there for a good 7, 8 years, and I mean, I remember one time, because it was only you could only fit 3 cars in this little garage. At one time, there was like 20 cars sitting out in the drive, in the actual, like, in the the driveway. This lady was like, "This is ridiculous. Like, I don't know, you know." So we ended up getting kicked out of there. The township ran us out. They Because we didn't own the property, we
Hmm.
we had to leave, and then that's where I ended up at my shop that I have now. They've been there for 12 years. So the one up in Mount Bethel. So it's like a progression that forced me to move out of there. I wasn't ready to move out. I liked it there, but had to move to the bigger shop. But yeah, I mean, I didn't start it with the intentions of being a tuner. People ask me that all the time. They're like, did you start off, this was like a dream job? I'm like, no, this was like kind of like fuck around. This was just, I had fun doing it. It interested me, and it turned into this. It was just progressively just kind of snowballed. So
I feel
I don't
like
know.
that's most tuners. They're like, I just started doing it for my friends, and then all of a sudden I'm doing it for other people, and then, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the best way if you can turn like something that's a passion into, business. It's, you're like super excited about it. And it's, I still like tuning cars, although sometimes I hate it, but it has its ups and downs. So,
And then
yeah.
my last one after I always ask people like their car and their businesses. How did you hear of Sloppy? I know we've had an interview before where we shot one
Yeah.
at your, because people are like, oh wow, you're finally having Evans on. I'm like, well, I made a terrible audio video a long time ago.
We shot it in the front office with yeah, it was like echo
It was
crazy.
empty, and yeah, it was terrible. And I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
I don't have external mics or anything like that, so whatever. But how
Yeah.
did you hear of Sloppy Mechanics, and what is your view? Is it good or bad for automotive or whatever.
I mean, it's honestly, I don't pay attention to a lot of stuff that goes on in the industry. Like I know you guys, you have the sloppy thing, and it's cool. It's like a DIY kind of, you know, from what I can tell. I haven't really sat down and went through like any of that. Actually, it's funny. Sometimes if I'm Googling something, I think I was Googling a GM part number for a map sensor,
The four
and
bar?
like a 3 bar maybe or something,
Oh
and all of a
yeah,
sudden,
my wiki
like,
shows up.
yeah, it shows up, and I'm like, oh no shit, look at that, that's cool. This was like maybe a year ago. I'm like, that's pretty helpful. So yeah, it's good. I mean, if you're helping everyone out, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, it's more of a satire question than
Yeah,
it is to, yeah, you don't care and you don't have time to
I
be
don't.
on the
I'm
internet
so
that much.
I did. Yeah, I try to avoid it.
Yeah, no kidding. I know we're friends on Facebook and I don't think you've ever made a post. Or you always just leave me out of them. It's fine either way.
I haven't posted on Facebook in like, I'm gonna say maybe 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, that's what it
I don't
seems
know.
like.
I just try to avoid it.
There's no reason to, honestly.
Well, I get the crazy stuff. Like if I go and I start posting on
You want
Facebook,
to say hi?
I
Your next thing is going to be what you need to ask. You want to just ask him quick?
I don't honestly.
Okay, okay.
You
Well,
say that I was here.
okay,
You say your wife just delivered the candy.
yes. Jamie said she likes your shirts. I guess you gave her, well, I know you gave her a shirt or two. She said hers is getting worn out. She likes it so much. So
oh
she's like,
the original ones that we had made,
yeah, whatever the
the
shirt
ones
material was, she is in love with
the,
it.
those are made by a company called Threadbird.
Huh.
No, they're American. Threadbird was the place that printed it for us. It's American Apparel. That's actually this shirt I have on right now.
Oh,
It's like the
okay.
best. They're like super comfortable.
I think that's what she uses to make our shirts, but for whatever reason, that batch is like silk or
I know.
whatever.
I still have them. I still wear them. Yeah, they're
Uh,
great.
I'll pay for a 5 pack. We could send them to her.
That's what I use.
American
But there's
Apparel.
something about his shirt specifically.
That's what I said.
I lived in them.
Yeah, I
She
still
said
wear
the
mine. They're
same
great.
thing. That he says he still has some.
We need to buy them.
Do you hear? We need to
Yeah.
buy them. She's pointing at me.
Amazing shirts.
Okay. He said he has them.
Yeah,
He wears them.
they're legit the best shirts we've ever had made.
Listening to you, I'm saying.
What?
I'm listening to you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that was the other question. But yeah, and then
Yeah, I avoid Facebook. If I post on Facebook, I get like literally people send me messages on Facebook, and every probably once a year I go and look at my messages, and there's like insane amounts,
it's
and
all for
it's like
tuning and garbage, right?
well, yeah, but it's crazy stuff. I'm like, I don't want to have a conversation about some weird thing. It's like 3 a.m. in the morning. They're sending the message. Like, I'm glad I never saw any of this stuff. Just like it's like asking crazy stuff about cars. I'm like, I can't. Uh,
No, yeah, every one of my friends in the industry is like, message my business page. Don't what? And
oh
I'm like,
God,
well,
no.
you're all entertaining it, so it's your
Yeah,
fault.
no, nope, nope.
Uh, any thoughts on doing a series using different dynos? The Dynapack is a great hub dyno, but hard to find one to rent. Maybe a series of how-to with different dynos in the shop area, or in shops in the area. Sorry.
I mean, I have a main line now.
Oh, nice.
Um,
That's big boy stuff.
yeah, the actually it's still cheaper than a Dynapack by a lot.
Oh,
Because my reason for switching from the Dynapack to the main line was because my Dynapack is 20 years old. It still works. And I've used it probably more than anybody else. I mean, I might be wrong, but like there, I mean, that thing was on almost every day for years and years and years. But I just get concerned with, wear and tear. Like nothing's ever broken on it. That was not a fault of my own. Like breaking a cable or something stupid with the Dynapack. But I just got to the point where it got me nervous. So last year I ordered a main line because, if a dyno goes down, you're not getting a dyno for 6 months to a year now.
yeah,
It took
100%.
me 6 months to get the main line here, and then another few months to get it wired into the 3-phase of the building and get it operational. And
You're almost a year in case your other one broke. Yeah, you would have been
yeah,
out, you would have been
yeah,
out forever.
yeah. So I just looked at it like this thing is, I have to have it, you know.
You'd
So
have to
I
be
just
calling
phoned.
me to put stuff on the paving company. I have to give you
Oh
keys
yeah,
and an alarm code.
you still use that place?
Oh
Deal?
yeah, yep.
That's
That's
great.
my. I've been friends with Troy for like 25 years.
Nice.
So yeah, we
Yeah.
would just bring bullshit there all the time, and he got tired of it. And he's like, dude, I think a year in, he's like, we're putting like 1984 LTDs on with nitrous, and he doesn't care about that stuff at all. He has nice
Yeah.
cars. He couldn't care less. So he's like, Matt, here's keys and an alarm code. Just put this bullshit
Nice.
on and get it out of here. Don't call me
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah.
And that's
Nice.
kind of how it is since
Yeah.
then. It's the same.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
yeah,
think,
it's still
I
there,
mean,
still working.
yeah, it's a dyno jet, right?
Yeah, like one of the first 224s. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've been on dyno jets when I used to travel and tune into Hawaii, Colorado, a bunch of places, Arizona. I would try to get a hub dyno, but no one would ever have any kind of hub dyno. So it'd be on a dyno jet. It just sketches me out. If you're used to one type of dyno, um, you go on like the jets. It's just like the rollers spinning down. After you make a run,
Oh
it
yeah, I
just
mean
freaks me
yours.
out.
That was the first time I've ever seen anything like that, and I'm like, wow,
Yeah,
that's neat. Because
yeah.
yeah, it just eliminates the traction and you can do all the awesome
Hmm.
stuff. But I was like, where do you even get this? Like,
New Zealand, and you wait forever for it. But yeah, the main line, even fully loaded, was like 50 grand cheaper than the comparable
wow,
Dynapack. Yeah.
that's incredible.
So
That's a
yeah, it was a
ridiculous
substantial
amount of
amount.
money.
Yeah. So Dynapack's been great though. I mean, if I've had it for 20 years. Like I said, I was 10 years outside of the warranty on that dyno, and the PC had a problem. They were ready to overnight me a PC they have a US office. And the US office was like, hey, we know you need to get back up and running. 10 years outside of warranty, they were ready to overnight me a PC to keep me going for the rest of the week for tuning. I mean, you
Wow.
can't ask for much more than that. So they're great to deal with. So is Mainline. They're good too. So
I've
I
heard
can see the
that
answer.
about mainline is it's just you can just call them and they're
Yeah.
on there. The one
Yeah.
guy I've had on the show frequently, uh, Joe from Tempest Motorsports.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
He has a mainline and he just bought the hubs for the front now so he can do 4-wheel drive.
Oh,
And
nice.
he has said the same thing. He has used like 10 dynos a lot and
Yeah,
that one's the
yeah.
best by far.
It's super easy to set up and get going. Like in comparison, there was a little learning curve for me, like because I got the thing and I'm like, damn it, I know what I want because I'm like used to the Dynapack. I can just get on that thing. I can keystroke it without even looking at the screen and get to do what I want it to do, and load the car up and do the pools. And with the main line, it was a little learning curve, but honestly, the main line is easier to deal with to set a car up and get it going than the Dynapack. The only thing I don't like about the main line is if you're doing a lot of comparisons, so you do a pool to pool comparison. So if you're mapping out variable cam and you're trying to compare torque curves, you can do a comparison, but it's just not as nicely integrated as a Dynapack. It's just not as, you have to go through like extra screens and open a bunch of
It's
stuff
like a
up. It's
Mustang
like,
dyno. It is
yeah,
it is
yeah,
painful to get an overlay, and then it's
yep,
not easy to scale the screen. I hate, man.
yeah,
I'm always like,
yeah,
just throw it away. I don't care. I don't care what the difference is because
yeah,
it's ugly and it takes 10 minutes, and
yeah,
I've lost interest. But
yeah,
yeah, the
yeah,
DynoJet is king for that. Like the new software is not anywhere near that easy. The old one is literally like you put the car on and you floor it, and it just
yeah,
makes the files wherever you put them, and then you can fire off 12 of them in a row and look at all of them in 1 second.
yep. That's probably the software I'm familiar with when I have used it in the past, but
Yeah,
yeah,
old
it
WinPep
just
7.
yes, yep. It just freaks me out with the damn roller winding down. There was actually a guy that we knew from racing. Um, he was doing a Baja car. He was actually a import drag racer, and he was doing a Baja car, chassis car, and he was on a jet. And I don't know the whole details of what happened, but he had long hair, and he went to check the car as he never shut the roller at the brake. His head got sucked in and got killed. and his hair got caught. I'm like, I
Oh,
can't even think about it. Like
I was
ever
hoping you
since,
would say like he got scalped, but yeah, death is
no,
far
he,
worse.
it's so bad. It was crazy.
The
But
hair,
ever
man,
since then, I'm,
machining and stuff like that, or loose
oh yeah,
clothes.
oh yeah.
Don't reach over the lathe. Never.
Nope, nope, nope.
Yeah, someone else just said Wimpep 8 is poo. Yeah, I don't
I
like it.
haven't used
I'm
it.
gonna tune on a Wimpep 8 dyno Sunday, and I'm already like, the guy will set up the software for me. I don't even want to touch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, hub versus roller. I would like to know what to look out as far as putting something on a hub next year.
I think the biggest thing that I have seen, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this on going from a dyno jet, but I've always noticed if I get everything dialed in on dyno jet, let's say I'm doing third gear, fourth gear pool, you go out on the street, the air fuel is never the same.
Hmm.
It always is off by half point, 3/4 point. It drives me nuts. And if I'm on the Dynapack or I'm on the main line, it's always dead nuts on. Like I can always get a good if I put
Yeah,
the
the load is much
yeah,
better.
you can specify like the ramp rate, which is your time under load, and it's always pretty damn good. Usually I get like a 6 to 8 second sweep, which is pretty good for like an average like total time to do a pool, and it's comparable to like the load you'd see like on like the road, but it drives me nuts. So
I've noticed it. Mine's inertia only, and
mhm.
it's what I haven't purchased it or anything. I'm in a lucky position there. But
Yeah,
the other one I'm tuning on, Maple Grove Automotive on Sunday, they have a load bearing dyno jet, and yeah, I know the
okay.
difference. Well, immediately you can simulate like 60,000 pounds or something ridiculous. Like,
Oh wow.
I think it'll break 1,000 horsepower, but again, you're limited by traction, not like
Right.
yours.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, I notice a huge difference on those. I've learned enough at least to know. I only have a small variation with mostly what I do, but I've learned enough to know to just keep it safe on both ends. I
Right.
might tune for max power and then pull it back a tiny bit. And
Hmm.
then obviously I think everybody does that unless it's your
Yeah.
friend that wants all of it. He wants
Yeah.
to gut it, or
Yeah.
yeah, he
Yeah.
doesn't care. So
Yeah.
there's people I know that are like, whatever happens, and I'm like, okay, I know you don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I notice a
Yeah.
little bit of that, but I know it's because there's no load cell. And then obviously I have some big boy turbo autos that only spin the drum like 1 second. But
Oh
yeah,
wow.
it just seems like that. They're just like, what? And you're like,
Yeah.
okay. I
Yeah.
know it's a
Yeah.
little bit longer than that, but it seems instantaneous if you watch a
Yeah.
video. But
Yeah.
it's at least enough to ballpark a 1,500 horsepower car and then
Yeah. You're gonna
touch
end
it
up
up.
track tuning it anyway.
You
So
have to, yeah.
uh, that's whatever I would do all the drag stuff. We get on the dyno, sort it out. I'd get spark timing close, get air fuel spot on, go to the track. I'm always tweaking it. And it's just, I don't get
Well,
too stressed.
the people that are good at that I do the main tuning on, they know to like, if the weather's good, to toss a degree in it or what. They're messing around with
Hmm.
it anyway. After
Hmm.
it's hashed out for like, best horsepower per degree and everything else.
Yeah.
All right, what's your thoughts on tuning a stock block versus built engines? Yeah, I mean, that's two different questions, like stock block versus built, because I think he means SBE, like stock bottom end Honda or LS versus a Pistons rods one.
I
You
can
don't.
say that it's actually kind of funny I've been over the years and I had this discussion with one of my old buddies from many years ago. He had a 2JZ, real nice Supra. He had a stock Supra motor in it. We made, I'm going to say, right around 1,000 wheel. This thing lived for years. It had no issues. Then he's like, you know what? I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to do built main caps, build the whole motor, do this, do that. Like he went wild with this thing. Come back, and we literally had three separate motors, three separate retries with this thing, like piston scuffing on the first motor. And we're running similar timing. We're running the same fuel. It's like piston wall wasn't right. So then we open up the piss in the wall on it. Then it's like the next thing he just went through, and it was always stupid stuff. And he's like, man, after all the shit, he put the stock motor back in that was on
No
the side.
problem. Yeah.
That shit's still right. So it's like it comes down to, I think, machining sometimes too. You got good parts, but like there's
It's
so
a
much
joke.
bad machining.
There's only
Yeah.
one guy, you probably know who it is, Matt Miller. He's in between us. He does K series and LSs and a lot of diesel stuff, like probably
Okay.
75% diesels. And I've
Huh.
tuned a lot of cars where he has done the motor, and they're like the only ones in the area that have oil pressure. So I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, he actually did an engine for me that's in my Mustang now. But same thing, I
Nice.
see it all the time at the dyno. Someone has an SBE car with like whatever I call it a "Don't BS Me" build, and they copy a build that I have put out for many years, and it's always cranking out a result. They do
Yeah.
that, and then they're like, "All right, I'm ready." They do pistons, rods, cylinder heads, intake, big ass turbo, and it makes like 100 horsepower more than their bullshit build.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you're worried like, man, where'd all my money go? Now I have two
Oh yeah.
thousand dollar cylinder heads, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, and they're
Yeah.
like, my turbo's gigantic. Why does it make
Yeah.
800 instead of 700? I'm pissed off. Yeah,
Yeah. On a V8, it's probably not so much of an issue with like power band, but I guess so many people will come in with these big turbo builds for like four-cylinder, even six-cylinder stuff, and it's such a laggy turd.
yeah,
And you tune it, and it's like it makes the number, but they're like, man, it drives like shit. Well, yeah, it drives like shit because it isn't spool tool, you know,
yeah. You get saved
whatever.
on that with like the big. Mostly, it's a big V8 turbo
Hmm.
car. So as soon as you hit any power, your converter can come up to, in its CVTs. So yeah,
Hmm.
again, it's not that bad on if it's not a lag machine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's one of his main things was like you don't necessarily want to run a lot of torque down low on a lot of those four cylinders because they'll bend a rod off. But up top,
Yeah.
you can really slam it in. And then I
Yeah.
think he means like how much more can you hit them down low? Basically everything they got, or do you tiptoe, or blah blah blah.
I mean, there's only so much if the turbo doesn't spool. If it's lazy, the power band's lazy, you can lean on it because it's not enough load on it. You don't have enough cylinder pressure. So it kind of comes down to, I mean, when I tune pretty much anything anymore, I'm using knock sensors. There's no guessing. I do most of the bigger builds or even stuff I do a lot of stock S2000 stuff. They're
Hmm.
pretty strong motors. Everything that we're running on those standalone wise do per cylinder knock correction. There's no guessing. You know how much you can keep putting the timing in it until you start seeing some, a little bit of activity, back it out, and it's you feel it out pretty quick.
I'm interested in messing around with that a little bit more because it seems like the stock bottom LS. I mean, Holly has knock sensors and stuff, but I
It
always
doesn't
wanted
work
to,
very well.
yeah, I always wanted to put like the next combo I'm doing is fairly simple. I wanted to put it on with like 87 and walk it up
Hmm.
and see where it makes noise versus where it makes power. But then I know
Hmm.
it's different for every car because of cam and, heavy springs or loud valves, blah,
I
blah, blah.
noticed I've noticed on the Holly stuff, experimenting with the knock control and trying to get it consistent. The LS stuff, from what I've seen with the Holly, the knock processing board is not very ideal. There's too much. You get one engine with a cam that, even playing with the knock sensitivity, it's just through the roof.
Yeah,
And the thing
same with the stock computer. You ever run into that?
I have, and usually what I'll do is run an external knock monitoring device, and actually, like a tuner nerd is another. It's like an affordable one. There's all kinds of ones on the market, but the
Det
tuner,
cans.
yeah, you can hear that. You can wear audio headphones through it, and then you can actually process the signal through a laptop and plot it, and you can
Ah,
actually see, and you can put your own filter on it to basically filter out noise versus, and you can listen to it as well, and then you'll know if you're doing the pool, like, okay, this is actually real, this isn't, and then from knowing the threshold, then you can go back into the stock knock control tables and detune it until the ECU is jiving with what your knock monitoring device is saying. That's the best way to handle it. So it takes a
yeah,
little bit of back and forth, but
I would say most of that stuff you're using the Holly on, you're not really pushing for knock. It'd be nice if it was better than it is, and I'm interested to try it. But yeah, most And then I would say, as far as my experience with stock bottom end stuff, if you're anywhere close to that, you're going to break a piston. So unless it's
Yeah,
ethanol, ethanol doesn't. I don't think I've ever had an e car knock. I don't think you can. You could.
you
You're
can
gonna.
get, you can, you
Yeah.
can, you definitely, if you, so I use A Infinity a lot. I use Link G4X a lot. And Haltech is okay with knock control, but when you have a proper knock processing board on the standalone, and then you can look at all the cylinders. It's direct fire, so you're able to actually detune each cylinder on the fly. You can see, and you have logging that can log at like 1,000 hertz. You can
Ooh.
see, yeah, you can see all this stuff, and even on something that it's a low power where you'd normally run, okay, I'm running this much timing on it, everything seems good. When you're looking at that kind of resolution, you can actually start to catch things, and it starts to open up your eyes of like, well, two cylinders out of the eight are doing something. And then you can allow it to just pull the timing just a few degrees, if it needs to. And it can live like that. Obviously you don't want it to knock, but it works for sure.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I've never touched an Infinity car. Well, someone had one on a fourth gen Camaro, and I like just got it
Hmm.
to idle, and a little bit better. But man, that's been so
It's
long.
it's the same thing as a programming wise. It's the same airflow model as a Gen 3 SOC ECU. Most of the language and the tables are the same thing.
Hmm.
So most of the VE based tuning models, like with all the standalones, Holly doesn't follow that rule, but most all of them have very similar kind of programming logic. So, which I prefer whenever possible, trying to use the VE based stuff. I like math based tuning. I don't like the injection time based, like an AEM Series 2, or like, I don't know. There's all kinds of other stuff that just, it sucks. Like you're just playing whack a mole with the numbers to make it run, and there's no right or wrong value in the field table necessarily. Where a VE, it's like it has to be close, and it's cool because you can take a VE table from one engine and put it into another engine, at least get it to fire and run pretty good as long as you have all the proper stuff scaled for injector data and all that. Like it makes more sense. So
Yeah, you can. Well, you can choose VE on Holly, but yeah, it doesn't have the same.
mhm.
It's basically pounds hour when you break it down, right?
Yeah, that's an injection time based model, and that's all
Oh,
you're doing. All you're doing is, and in that case, you're scaling for your actual flow rate, like for your injector, and then translating that into a pulse width. You're just not doing it through that airflow model base. What I don't like about Holly is that you're not able to see, like, so if you have a VE model, you should be able to see your estimated airflow coming from your VE number, and it should jive. If you put a MAF on the car, it should jive with the MAF sensor. So if your
hmm.
MAF is reading, let's say 8 grams per second at idle, measuring it, your VE table should correlate to 8 grams per second. Like they should match each other. And
And
if
it
they
does
don't,
not.
if they don't, then obviously something's not right. But when you look at like you're dialing in the Holly, I see people have like wacky VE numbers, and the car still runs right because there's no penalty to having the wrong airflow model other than it's incorrect. Like if VE tuning, you're like, this is not right. You're not moving.
Yeah,
I
numbers
mean,
are wacky.
yeah, like if you're dealing with like a torque based ECU, it's so fucked off. Like the throttle won't open right. Like nothing is right. So,
Yeah,
but like,
people had asked questions about something similar to that, and I'm like, yeah, torque. I think we had talked about that years ago. I'm like, torque
yeah,
based. I don't care. I don't want to. Not interested.
yeah,
I'd rather tune a
it's
lawnmower.
it's actually really nice. Like if you can model torque, if everything's nailed down properly, so you have your airflow model is properly represented, your maximum brake torque timing table that references spark timing versus what the theoretical maximum is, and then you have all the other bits and pieces in place, you can model an engine fairly close in terms of torque. If you want to put a limiter on an engine, so say you want to run down the track and you want to say, I want to run this thing and I want to be at 400 pound-feet of torque in first, or I want to have a limiter and I want to have 200 pound-feet of torque on the limiter, and it can correlate spark timing cut or spark timing retard or throttle closure, and knowing all of that and actually can predict the torque model, you can just tell it what torque you want to do and it does it. and it's like dead nuts on. It's actually pretty awesome.
Yeah, I
It
mean,
just
I
takes a little.
know like the newer Fords drive amazing with having like a blower and making 800 horsepower. So all
Mhm.
that's incredible. But yeah,
It
uh,
sucks to model out, but
yeah.
it is cool if you can get it. Even on a standalone. Like standalone stuff now is moving to torque modeling. So a lot of the stuff, Haltech has it, Link has it, Motec has it. It's all torque based, and it's actually pretty badass. Like if you get it, it's not actually not that bad to set up on a standalone wise. You just have to have a
Well,
dyno.
yeah, I would assume the standalones are always usually easier to hammer stuff out.
Yeah, yeah,
Hopefully.
yeah. Well, it can be super confusing, but like it goes back to the basics of like the airflow models. So if you're tuning an airflow based model, a VE model, and everything's all out of whack, then your torque numbers won't be right, even on a standalone. So it's one of my pet peeves is like dealing with VE tuning and airflow models and stuff just not being right. Holly doesn't have, you can't actually see the grams per second that you're moving with your table. So every other standalone that I work with has it. It's like you can see estimated airflow. Like it should jive, it should be close. It's just like you could, I don't know. There's certain
Now I
things
know what
about
you
split
mean. You
system.
can't see that at all.
No, you and people are going, well, my car runs fine. It's like, well, your car runs fine, but it doesn't mean it's right. Like, I don't know. Just I'm very like particular about calibrating and trying to do like OEM style calibrating. It's just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
So,
Someone had this one too. It says for sport front wheel drive, what ECU has the best traction control strategy, and can you compare and contrast them? He lists Motec, Fueltech, and Haltech, which I guess if I were to ask this, I would say list your top two or three, and then say what's better or worse.
um, traction control wise, Motec M1 is pretty badass. Has a super fast processor. Um, it depends. So with Motec, I don't know if you're familiar with any of the M1 stuff for
I
Motec.
know what it is, but yeah,
Yeah. So with Motec, you have to buy firmware packages, and which, in my opinion, kind of sucks. That's one of the things that turns me off from dealing with it a lot of times. So firmware packages, you buy an M1 box. It has no firmware on it.
I've
You
heard
have
that
to purchase.
I had to talk to the twins from AMS Performance about this, and they
Mhm.
said the same thing. Like it's all custom firmware, so you can buy a $10,000 worth of Motec stuff, but none of it works or talks to each other.
Yeah, so the firmware is going to be a tuner specific thing. So you can go to Motec, you can purchase like an M150, and then you need to purchase the firmware package for it. And you can get the Motec ones, or you can get a tuner, like an actual individual that does the firmware. So you have to buy a dev license, the developer license, and a box, which is 8 grand for Motec.
Jeez,
Then if you can go in and then you can code out at your own firmware, if you know how to do the
like
coding
John
and
Reed Racing has custom.
exactly.
I know.
Exactly. So this is so where I'm going with this with Motec is the traction control can be badass, but it depends on your firmware package. So like John Reed, for example, has a torque based, specifically torque based traction control that, and even on launch control, it's drive by wire based and it's so damn consistent. It's amazing. Like I know people who are using it, but then you're locked into John Reed and there's nothing wrong with it, but you're locked into that firmware. So you're having an issue, you have to go to John Reed. Like Motec is going to go, we can't help you. Like it's,
Oh
if you're
yeah.
running, if you're running the Motec package, you're running like a GRP package for Motec, which is their race package. One of the ones they have, you're not going to get everything that John Reed puts in. So it's like, it, Motec is great, but you're kind of stuck in that. And so if a firmware package from John Reed is like $1,500. So now if you're going to somebody else writing another one, you're going to cough up at least 1,000 to $1,500 or another third. It's like, it's insane. Just like, when does it stop? Um, that's the only reason I tend to not use the M1 stuff. I mean, it works, and you can't get M1 stuff right now. Just like Motec is on some severe deficiency for chip in their boards. So that's another thing to factor in. But Motec has a great traction control, works awesome. But again, firmware package based.
That's what I've had Jay from Real Street on, and he said,
Yeah,
yeah, for you can have a 1400 horsepower Supra, and you can just smash it in first gear, and it
yes,
never because same thing, it's probably torque modeled out and it'll only apply what it
Yep.
can use, and then from there it has a slip table, or all of the above is happening.
Yeah.
And he's like, you
So,
can really enjoy that car because you can actually use the gas pedal.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Motec. So Motec has a great traction control. Haltech stuff works okay. Um, I don't know about the Nexus because it has a faster processor. The Elite works fairly well. Fuel Tech is okay. It works. There's a lot of people running super fast with sport front wheel drive cars with it. That's like the hot new thing. I'm not very fond of Fuel Tech myself, only because it's injection time based tuning. And a lot of the software, in my opinion, is kind of clunky and it's really dumbed down. Like they don't give you enough control, or like if you want to write a custom strategy, for example, like let's say you want to come up with something, you want to do something custom, you're stuck with whatever the developers have in the software. There's no flexibility. Haltech at least has a lot of flexibility. So you can plot any runtime value and make a 3-dimensional or even 4-dimensional table for traction control, come up with your own strategy on the fly. You're stuck with what Fuel Tech has written.
I do
Link
like
sheet
that. I mean, I tuned like a Haltech car last week or something, and it's one of the first times I've ever touched Haltech, and it is nice how you can, like Holly, you can make whatever advanced table you want, and
Yep,
it's
yep.
exactly the
Similar
same
idea.
where,
Yep.
I mean, I'm used to that, so it's funny, or Megasquirt stuff where you can pretty much make your own access points, but then other stuff doesn't have it. And yeah, it's confusing to me when I open up. I've been checking out Fuel Tech at times too, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't like this at all because I can't change access.
Yeah. It works. It's a simple system in comparison to that. It's gotten a lot of hype, and there's a lot of people, fast guys running it. And don't get me wrong,
They're
like
killing it with marketing, that's for sure, because all I hear
I
about them for like the last 5
yeah,
years is
yeah.
craziness, but then I'm like, who do you know has it?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's gotten large, like in terms of people using it.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's grown. I mean, everybody seems to be wanting to use it or whatever. But what I go to almost all of my projects is the Link G4X. Link is a system that not a lot of people here in the States use. It's probably one of the best standalone systems for the money. I mean, for me, when I'm looking at a standalone system, and really what sets them apart from one from the other. If you look at standalones, and let's just say you want to integrate a standalone into, I don't know, a Subaru, right? And a Subaru from a newer Subaru is going to be highly CAN based. So all the buttons on the dash, cruise control buttons, mode switch buttons, all of that's talking on the CAN network. If you want to put a standalone into it, you're limited now because there's only maybe 2 or 3 plug and plays that can support it. Link has an open CAN network. They actually have 2 CAN network channels. If you know CAN and you can sniff the OEM CAN data, you can put it in. You can read wheel speeds, buttons on the steering wheel, all the dash functionality can
Oh,
still work.
nice.
Broadcast, send and receive. And on top of that, you have, I think it's like 150 channels you can log at 1,000 hertz for like an hour. It's insanity of what it can do. And the traction control is badass. They have traditional traction control that's slip based. They have a new thing called power management. Power management has closed loop and open loop type of routines for the traction control purposes. I mean, there's so much configurability in it. And then what's awesome is you also have math channels. You can write your own custom math channels and integrate that as a runtime value to like a table. So if you're trying to come up with a strategy that doesn't exist, you literally can write it if you have enough creativity and do as crazy of a math expression as you want using variables that are coming into the link that it's for what it is and for the price you pay, you cannot beat it.
Yeah,
It's
it
just,
seems I didn't know you could do so much.
yeah,
I've heard. Oh well, we wanted to talk about Max ECU. My buddy with the 4200 stuff is on, and he
Max
has a
is
bunch
great
of
too.
Max ECU stuff because I know they can do CAN,
Yep.
and I wish I
Yep.
knew more about it. But yeah, obviously for any integration on something newer at all, that's incredible because you can just throw info in and out that's already existing, and that is
Yep.
cool how you don't need to do, like you said, you can use a cruise control button to do rolling in lag more than likely with
Hmm.
no wiring.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
incredible.
and you can retain all the functionality with all the cars. I mean, you have to have a CAN sniffer and be able to sniff the network, and being able to do that, which isn't actually super difficult. And once you have all your addresses and your communication speeds, you just can go in and assign it. And it's like I said, it's all open. To me, that really sets a standalone apart from another one. Like you can go in and, I mean, Haltech is more geared towards a Supra or like a Fox body or like, whatever, like these, like a car that's more simplistic. And
Yeah.
Haltech does have the newer cars where you can make CAN functionality work, but then you're limited to what they've written in terms of the CAN communication. So I'm doing a K series turbo in a Scion FRS, and it's on a Haltech. And you can actually use a lot of the OEM functionality, like the buttons will work, like AC switch works on the CAN network. So you can, assign AC input to offset like your fans coming on and idle and all that stuff. But you can't get down to even further programming. Like you're limited to what they've basically defined. So it's not an open CAN network, basically what I'm saying. So, I mean, it depends how deep you want to go with like tuning and like digging into stuff. But like for the money, you cannot beat it. It's insane what it can do.
I'll have to grab the software and poke around.
Yeah. I
know I've seen the Link sticker on a lot of like road race cars.
It's the worst logo I've ever seen. Yeah, it's awful.
It's like some naming screaming... your ECU Megasquirt.
Yeah.
Those poor guys.
Yeah.
That Bruce guy is just weird. I mean, everybody else can't stand it, but that Bruce is the president of all that.
Of DIY?
Well, no, Bruce Bowling owns the Megasquirt chip.
Oh.
And when they're like, can we call it Blue Dolphin? And he's like, no. And they're like, can we have anybody write software that's not a third-party guy and not in Java? And Bruce is like, no.
Huh.
So that's the big holdup with all of that stuff. So my buddy Mike that owns EFI Source that does like all in-house integrated circuit boards, surface mounting components, he does all of that. And he's like, can I make this really cool shit right now? And they're like, well, maybe we can agree on that in like a year and a half. He's like, cool. It's like the dog in the room that's on fire, and he goes, this is fine.
Yeah.
That's what they're kind of stuck with. That's how I understand it, how painful it is. All right, well, I don't know if cars you do this that much, so it'll be a good question. But can you guys discuss onboard air for boost control, pros and cons? They're thinking of, well, I have a thing I sell plug and play Holley wiring products, and one of them is a dial, like a trim dial, and I frequently call it dial a boost because what I set it up for is because people are like, cool, I have all this badass stuff and I can go from 4 to 800, but I don't know how I do it. Like, how do I do it? Do I have to change my tune? So that dial hooks up and you got 400 here and 800 here. And then I offset it on some cars based off of like ethanol content. So it limits the max amount of boost to something not retarded when you have 11% alcohol in the car. And then similarly, I'll set it up to do like boost by mile an hour. And it's just a dial of how aggressive it is. But he's asking about going to like onboard air or CO2 versus...
Oh, CO2 based.
Yeah. That's a use case question. Like, that's what you're going to say, I'm sure.
It's back in the day, we used to do CO2 based boost control. I did it on our drag cars for a while. It's super popular. The one thing I ran into, I find as a disadvantage, is the CO2, because it's so cold as it's coming out, it would actually freeze the wastegate diaphragms. And we would start getting wastegate diaphragm separation. And we'd have to pull apart the wastegates and deal with it. That was one problem. Now on the older tile gates, I haven't tried it on the new like MVS, MVRs, Turbo Smart stuff, I'm not sure. But we would actually run enough pressure to actually blow the diaphragm out at the base, and then it would leak the CO2 out. So we actually had a lot of problems with it. And I just got so sick and tired of it that we went back to just, manifold pressure based. It works great. I mean, you have to have, in order to do it properly, you have to monitor your bottle pressure. You have to have your wastegate pressure. Everything's based on dome pressure control of your sensor. And you have to have your PIDs close so that it's tracking that target and getting you relatively close. I mean, I know certain systems, depending on what you're using, some of them will work with CO2 pressure and manifold pressure, which is the ideal way to do it. So you're cross-referencing your manifold
The
pressure
Holly
as
will
your
do it.
CO2.
Dome
Okay,
versus
yeah.
map, and then you
Yep.
set up. There's a bias table for the amount of dome equals a certain amount of psi, and then you
Right.
target the
That's
psi, and it has a
that's
go-to.
that's the only good way to do it. Like if you're integrating that, and when I'm doing it with a standalone, I usually build custom strategies like that, because it's trying to do CO2 like wastegate pressure on its own is a disaster because you're never quite correlating your manifold pressure quite right. But I mean, if you're trying to get a huge range of boost control for a traction limited car, it's definitely the way to go.
Yeah.
But there are other better. I've been finding um, lately, instead of running CO2 pressure, if a standalone can do it, using a blow-off valve and using a 3-port boost solenoid to control your vacuum reference to the blow-off valve. So if you're getting, so basically what I like to do on drag cars now is run super high wastegate springs. So like 30, 40 pounds worth of wastegate spring, basically like slamming the valve shut. Like it's not even a gate there essentially, and running a 3-port solenoid to control the boost to get it up to, a lot of the stuff I'm doing is 50,
that way
60.
you can knock a ton of it out at the.
You can, if you have a 50 mil, 60 mil blow off valve size and you let that valve open under boost, you can literally dump 5, 6, 800 horsepower out. Like I cut the power at least in
and
half.
then the turbo is already going, right? So
Exactly.
When you shut
So
that, it's got all of it.
So you get it first gear, you get it going off the line, you get to your shaft speed up. As soon as you click second or wherever you want to stage that power in, it's there. You don't have to wait for it, which then you don't have the stupid CO2 pressure. You don't have any of that bullshit. Your tank runs out of CO2. It's like you have to carry spare tanks.
I've never heard of that strategy. I've heard of my buddy back in the day, Frank, had like those YSI blower cars, and they would put a wastegate on a steel inlet tube and do similar. They pulley it to the moon, like 10% over speed because of belt slip, and then use the wastegate, to control the amount of power.
Yep, same idea, just using a blow-off valve, and it works really, really well.
Yeah, that's
I actually had a strategy with the one drag S2000 I was doing. I used to do pull wheelies, and it was because we couldn't run bars on the back to keep it down with the rules, and I had a strategy with a shock position sensor on the front wheels. So as soon as the wheel would pick up a certain amount of travel, it was getting into the wheelie. It was about to go into it. So then I would have the blow-off valve on a separate lookup table, just open loop, where it would open, it would dump the power, and the car would just stay up on stay right on the edge of that. And I would have it fed in going down the track with just enough to keep the tire on the ground and pretty much squatting back before it would pick up on the wheelie. It worked good. I mean, the car was fast and consistent like that.
I've never heard anybody say that. I love learning. My buddy with the 4200 stuff is asking a question. I always like to get him. He's like pioneering it, so I want to get him his answers. Is a 6-pole crank trigger going to cause issues for me at higher RPM and horsepower? People are telling me that I need a 58X or I will have issues.
No. Well, it depends on the processor speed of the ECU. That's really what it comes down to. So, for example, I know from Haltech, this is actually something I learned from a Haltech engineer many years ago. I had the same discussion of how many teeth are good. And he said at this time, and now everything's changed in technology, he said, well, you can have a 58 tooth wheel on it, but we're only processing 8 of the 58 teeth.
Understood,
like, what?
Yeah.
What are you talking about? He goes, we don't have enough processing resolution to crunch that many teeth.
Wow.
So
it has to skip them.
Yes, it literally looks in the pattern when you say, oh, it's a 58 tooth wheel and you're putting the trigger pattern in, it'll look at however many other teeth. It cannot process that fast enough. So it comes down to processing speed, a lot of it. I mean, it's obviously ECU like limitation. And so newer stuff, newer processor ECUs, it's actually sometimes detrimental you have so many teeth and it can process the teeth, and then it starts leading into problems that way. So you actually can, it's like almost too much.
Too much resolution. What's funny is he's
Right.
like he's blowing up. He's like, I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. Because people are, he's extremely intelligent and
Yeah.
is very good on his own, and people are saying that, and he's like, I don't understand why, But yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And again, it's really going to be standalone specific, like what it can actually handle.
Yeah,
So
it can't. Yeah, it makes total sense. It's a throwaway at some point because you're just giving it more than it can. Now, would you say that that's increasing overhead and you're losing some because you have so many trigger events?
if you have enough, if your processors can actually handle it, it isn't going to be an issue.
Huh,
Like
interesting.
it will give you better resolution because it has, for example, and it depends on, again, your strategy you're using. If you're doing per cylinder knock control and you're referencing each cylinder in relation to your resolution of your teeth as the engine's spinning around, if you have that much resolution, it can hone in on the movement, a very tiny increment of movement, because it has the available pulse pattern coming in. It can actually be more accurate in terms of how it applies a per cylinder knock correction with that much resolution. A low resolution, if you think about like your time between, teeth processing at high speeds, it's still coming in fast. And then you're processing your degrees of movement. But the more the ECU can actually handle, the better off it's actually going to be
Oh
able to
yeah,
go
I was
after.
just saying because in networking we run into an issue where you can do a lot, but the more you're trying to do, or the more connections, or the more packets, uh, the processor can handle it, but it's kind of throwing away a bunch of stuff that it could be doing if it wasn't working so hard.
Right.
So it gets a bunch of overhead, and it starts to just have issues with certain things depending on how you have it set up. And I was thinking like if it's, but I guess it's just a channel that's set up that it can't read any more triggers, and it's 2% of the process, and you're not, by giving it more trigger events, it's not going to 25% of
Right.
processing. Okay.
It's gonna just depend on the standalone, really.
How it
It's
all gets
there's
processed in firmware and
Yeah.
chip.
And the best part is you don't know any of it. You think you might know, and then you find out from an engineer and everything's like thrown out the window. Like there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that you're programming things and you're like, "Oh, this makes sense." And then you find out not anything that you think is going on is, it's like it's not matching up. Stuff works, but you know, there's been many times over the years where I talked to like an actual engineer at the company, and my mind's blown. I'm like, I can't believe
You're
that.
like, why does this happen at a 10 out of 12 cars? It's annoying the shit out of me. And they're
Yeah.
like, our firmware, someone said no when we needed that.
Yeah.
Very simply.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a good one for my buddy. He says, what's your favorite platform to tune? Meaning engine, ECU, power range, etc. Like what I call it the don't BS me clone, where I'm like, if people have no idea what they want, I hand them this combo and 400 to 800 horsepower. They're like, this is amazing, and it's like a whole certain layout. And do you have that? Uh, like a vehicle, ECU, turbo combo, like all the shit that's your favorite always works.
I mean, I tune so many things now. I mean, and if I'm at the shop and I do a couple cars a day, it'll be Honda, Miata, some kind of LS, something, Coyote, something.
So it's so different that you don't really have a favorite anymore.
I don't. I enjoy calibrating certain engines. Like I enjoy doing really complex things that give me a challenge up to a certain point before they become a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But I like to like drive by wire,
Yeah, you want to be
dual variable cam.
challenged.
I like calibrating something it's a challenge. I mean, the easy button for me is just some kind of a Honda with a decent standalone and whatever, and that's like a close my eyes and do it.
If you don't want to,
Is it?
if you're tired or you don't want to have a long day, you're like, do
Yeah,
like
yeah.
S300 B series turbo.
Oh, that's like incredibly easy. Yeah, that's super easy. Yeah, yeah.
All right, then what oh, this is good. Are you ever going to do any e-gate lessons? Electronic wastegate.
For the school, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
So that was we've had students ask about it before, and the technologies really only came out in the last little bit. And um, I do electronic wastegate control already with OEM ECU programming, and it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if you have any experience with it, but it's actually pretty cool. Where
What stock has electronic wastegate? I mean, you don't mean.
everything,
Oh, wow.
everything, yeah.
Well, I mean,
So Honda's,
it's a solenoid controlled, but it actually has a electronic wastegate.
yeah. So basically, you have a wastegate valve. You have your travel. The wastegate valve is controlled with a half bridge output, like drive-by-wire. The electronic wastegates are high current, so some of them pull up to 80 amps. Not continuously, but
Yeah,
they're
it
super
can.
high current
Yeah,
draw.
it can spike it.
Depending on how much back pressure you have, that's a big one that's going to dictate the amp draw on the circuit. But basically, you have a position sensor that measures your travel of your actuator move, or your valve in this case, your movement. So it'll be 0 millimeter to, let's say, 15 millimeter. 15 is all the way open, 0 is closed, and it's manipulating the current to the valve to get the travel right. And at the same time, the travel is moving and it's measuring this in real time. It's looking at manifold pressure. So typically you have, commanded boost, actual boost, and it will literally look at what it expects as a base duty cycle. So if like closed loop kind of control, it expects at this RPM at this manifold pressure, you should have 5 millimeter
30%
of
opening.
travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be millimeter of travel typically on
Not at
an
all on a
OEM speed.
percentage. It's going to be actual physical, but like a shock sensor. You don't care about the
Exactly.
percentage. You want to know how far it's moving.
Yep, yep. And then once you can establish that base table, it'd be the equivalent of like a base duty cycle table for closed loop. From there, then the system can basically go, all right, I know where I need to start at. Am I there? No. Okay. Am I under? Am I over? Move the current up or down to manipulate that. And again, it's a half bridge output, so it's just like drive by wire, moves it up and down. But it's pretty cool. It's really simple to tune, and actually, that's honestly the best way to go about wastegate, like, or boost control now. But
It
the
seems like a lot
problem,
of it's infancy, right? So the back end stuff isn't fully there yet.
is that, and this is a evolution of standalones. You'll find that the stuff that's on the market now all has, like, Fuel Tech, for example, or Hall Tech. They're all running a CAN base inline module to drive that electronic circuit, because the half bridge control for drive by wire, for example, doesn't have enough amp sync to actually move that valve right. So they need a 40 or an 80 amp circuit to actually do it, and nothing exists that goes inside the ECUs. So they're basically retrofitting this newer technology now as a CAN command between the ECU and the electric wastegate to do, to control that circuit. So um, I've been hesitant. I wanted to let the technology kind of sit on the market for a little bit before I started to do tutorials. Because the thing I don't want to do is get into it and then it's like stuff changes, or there's it.
They
So
change the whole control, and then you have a new video that isn't good
yeah,
anymore.
and it's, I put, for me to do tutorials, like, it's usually a lot of research testing. Like, I won't do a tutorial or make something unless I fully tested it myself, know it works 100%, and have strategies worked out. And then I'll, go, okay, I know it works. This is all legit. And so in the last year, it's been progressing. Everyone's moving towards that.
I think the
And
more the PDM ECU mixes together, that's going to
yeah,
become more prevalent. Like it seems like the Nexus stuff is the best foot in the door for that stuff to start happening.
a funny story about a Nexus, and this is like
People had
my
asked about
buddy.
the Nexus also, so go on a tangent about Nexus stuff.
So it works great. I'm not knocking Haltech, but it's a funny story, and I'm not going to say who this is, but they were sponsored by Haltech, and very well-known race car, and they went from an Elite. My buddy made this goes back years ago. He made a harness for the car basic Elite setup. I had tuned it. Car ran great for years. And the harness, like my buddy's he's not like a motorsport harness guy. Like he did a harness and it worked, and the harness got beat up over the years. So they're like, you know what? We're going to do a full, real nice harness. You get a professional made harness, like a real deal. And he got the Nexus. Haltech sponsors him, and he put the Nexus in the car. They couldn't get through more than a couple lapping sessions without the ECU overheating. Driving the same components that the basic relay board and the Elite were working with for years flawlessly. And it got to the point where no matter what they did, and he's working with Haltech, no matter what they did, they couldn't get this thing to stay running and keep running without tripping all of the, the maxes and all the fail-safe strategies with this thing, specifically PDM based controls. And they ended up pulling it. I mean, he missed basically the whole race season trying to get this thing to run. And he switched over a different system. He's not sponsored by Haltech anymore.
That's one of
but
the
it's
things
again not
that I think of too when I'm like, man, that's a lot of high current in an ECU box that doesn't like high current. And same thing, like you said about overheating, that's something I didn't know either, but it makes sense once you hear it. Like that thing is throwing amperage and it just overheats the circuitry on the other side.
And it may not be an issue for, let's say, a drag car. They're only on for a little bit of time.
Yeah, 100%.
Or this thing's on for 5-10 minutes at a time, full tilt on the track until it's running down,
you gotta hook
hitting
up the
probably...
cool shirt to the Nexus, right?
Yeah. But I mean, obviously his car could be kind of it's not
an
the
anomaly.
Rule. It could be,
or it's just not the best use case scenario for that.
Yeah,
product.
But nothing on his car was out of control. Like he wasn't trying to do all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, like you said, it was fine for years until
on an Elite it worked just fine. I mean, as far as functionality goes, it works good. It has more logging space than Elite, Haltech Elite, if you're comparing, because the Elite is the less tiered product. So the Elite can't log as much, can't log as fast. That's a sucky part with the Elite. Programming capability wise, it has a little bit more capability. Features and functions, there's a little bit more to the Nexus than the Elite. But the big thing is the built-in PDM. And people like it, people don't like it. For the price of a Nexus, you're getting close to an M-Tron or a Motec M1, and there's other options as you start to approach that price tier, $4,000 or $5,000 range. It's like you can get into something else. It's just really comes down to what you want. I mean, I don't know.
I kind of like that R3 is coming out, but yeah, they better. I'm sure. I mean, it's a whole new flagship, so they'll probably fix thermals, hopefully. Yeah. But similar where, like I said, my buddy EFI Source, Mike at AEA Electronics, I'm like, hey, these people are making the ECU and the PDU. That seems like it's going to be the way to go. But what about all the power? Because he's always said to me, he actually builds two separate sides of the board, and one's inputs and one's outputs, and everything. He understands. He builds integrated circuits for a living, so he's like, yeah, you can't mix the high and the low current anywhere near each other if possible. And I brought that up. I'm like, they put a PDU in the ECU, and he's like, well, that's dumb as shit. I mean, it sounds cool, but man, that's just inviting issues. So it's funny to hear that.
And you can get a lot of quality PDMs, like
totally separate.
Yeah.
I want to use a ECU Masters in my Fairmont if I can.
You should check out, again, I mean, not to plug Link, but Link came out with their PDM.
Oh, no.
The price is very similar to ECU Masters, and it gives you a lot more.
You said you like their stuff better.
There's a lot more flexibility with it. And it's open CAN. So like you can do a lot of stuff. And the price is awesome for it.
They call it the Link Razor PDM.
Yeah.
That's funny because it looks like Pink Razor because it's got like a purple top.
Yeah.
Anyway, my dyslexia brain is like, oh, Pink Razor. Oh yeah, look at that, $1,000. Yeah. That's like the cheaper than all the other ones. They're like $1,300.
Yep.
Interesting.
Their price point is killer. I mean, they're made in New Zealand. I don't know if everything made in New Zealand for car shit is badass. Australia, New Zealand. Everything badass comes from
We were just
from there.
talking about the people that make the 4200 manifold off air, make it in New Zealand.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does it have? 8 outputs, it looks like.
Yep. I think that's right. If
That's
you tier it with it, if you tier it with a G4X, like you tier it with their system,
I'm sure
you
it
can
is.
you can use it for more inputs, more outputs. That will actually directly derive electric wastegate.
Oh, nice.
It has enough sinking amps. So, yeah, it's cool for the price. You can't beat it.
Oh, yeah, it looks cool. Yeah, I'll have to look at their the link stuff. Never really thought of it until you
It's
said you
it's
like the features.
it's not a popular system, which is a shame. But
Maybe they need to get Fuel Tech's marketing guy.
yeah, the cool thing about Lincoln, they decided. So there used to be a G4 Plus, and now there's the G4X. That's the new current stuff from them. The G4 Plus, they were using a chip supplier like everyone else does in the industry, and in the middle of or towards the end of the production life of the G4 Plus, they only had enough boards or enough processors left. I think they only had like a couple hundred, a couple thousand left or whatever to produce all the boards. And they were like, we need to get more of these ordered. And the company's like, sorry, can't make any more. We're done. And they're like, well, fuck, what are we going to do? So they decided to start making their own shit in house and buying all the tooling equipment. So they actually produce all their own things in house. So they can fully control what goes on with production. They're not tied
Nice.
into like Motec right now they're kind of screwed. They don't have the chips to be able to make M1s. So it's, it's a kind of a big deal in the industry, like trying to get things. Everything's kind of out of whack now.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but that's a shame for them. Like, it's a big product and they can't get CPUs
Yeah.
because they're so outsourced, it seems.
Yep. It sucks. It's like the name of the game for everything now, but
That's what I just watched a Haltech video. It came out like today or yesterday about their production is all in house, so they wouldn't have to deal with that.
they were dealing with that, I think, about a year ago. They
That's what
were
it. Yeah, that's what they were saying. Scotty was taking Alan from the Skid Factory around, and they were showing like they said the same thing. They're like, we're at the mercy of all of this, and we didn't want to be doing that anymore. So they brought it all in.
when the Nexus I think it was the Nexus or the Elite came out. I can't remember which one. I think it was the Elite. Again, I could be wrong, or could be the Nexus. They had like 1,000 boards printed, and they had a supplier that did the ECU cases, and the supplier screwed something up, and they were made wrong or couldn't get them. I can't remember the
Couldn't fit the
exact
boards
story.
in or something.
They literally were sitting on thousands of boards for like months on end and couldn't sell anything because they couldn't put the freaking things in a case. So like, yeah, this is a disaster.
Incredible. What Oh, well, this is I kind of know your take on this from your earlier answers. My buddy Joey says, "Do you think the development of YouTube, social media, and DIY content has been better or worse for tuners like yourself or the tuning industry?"
I mean,
Both ways, I
there's
think.
there's so much information out there that you literally, I mean, you can find anything, most anything you want in a reasonable, if you want to know how to install something, you want to know, even like a product review. There's tons of people put reviews up. I mean, sometimes they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, so it's like whatever. But there's more information now than ever. I think if you can't figure it out, you probably shouldn't be messing with your car if you're a DIY. You know what I mean? Like you can literally just Google anything and find the answer. It's like right there.
Yeah.
I, I feel like I feel like people are getting stupider by the year. So it's like, or they're just lazier because they just want
Both.
everything
You're
handed.
not alone. You're not alone.
They're
I
just
think.
like, why can't you just tell me the answer? I'm like, dude, I could Google this in 1 minute and find the answer.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like,
Or it's a can of worms that's hard to explain. It's situational, or it depends on
yeah,
too many things.
yeah. I think that, I mean, DIY. I mean, I came from DIY. I refused to let anybody do anything, and I would tear into things and fuck shit up and learn. It's good if you. I still am like that. Like I just, for everything, I just do everything myself. And, I'm stubborn. I don't like to hire people to do even shit around the house. Like it's just do it, but I feel like if you can't find the answer, you shouldn't be messing with your car.
It's
just,
so easy to find it now. Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah.
see here they have a low side paired H bridge that can do 25 continuous and 70 amp peaks at 10 hertz.
Yep. It's legit. You can do drive by wire with that. You can do all kinds of whatever you can kind of dream up.
All right. I want to ask this one too. What is your what injectors do you like best for methanol or nitromethane in the sizes above a Bosch 210? Because I know that's controversial. It seems like all the meth injectors are trash. Or maybe it's just maybe you can answer. Is it just a high maintenance item? You just have to deal with it.
Any of that stuff, anything straight methanol or nitromethane, it's super high maintenance. Usually if I'm doing a project that's going to require that much fuel flow, I'm running at least an extra set of injectors. I typically just use injector dynamics, although they can have issues too. Like the 2600s they work fairly well. I was dealing with a drag car that actually had a set, just take a shit. And again, they were run ethanol. It could just be their fuel system in terms of like, I'm not maintaining the car or doing anything. I'm just tuning it. But they're like, yeah, I have an extra set of injectors in the car. Like, dude, why do you have an extra set of injectors? One went bad. I'm like, that's random. But typically if I'm dealing with something like that, I'm running at least an extra set or another set of injectors on top of it. And they're big injectors, some form of stage system. There's all kinds of big injectors out there. I usually stick with ID stuff. So, but yeah, if you're running nitromethane or straight methanol, you need to pickle your fuel system every time you run the car. So you need to get it out, put pump gas in there, let it run through. It'll run like shit. You should have another, calibration map just to run it on petrol, but at least put the petrol back in, pickle the system, and that way it'll store right. And that was
What
always
about
what we did
dumping
on
in like a
race
whole
cars.
can of 2-stroke top end lube?
You just gum up the
Like
injectors.
that Kroll's or whatever 2-stroke stuff. It
Yeah,
smells like cherries.
yeah.
You just
I
bomb that
mean,
in there.
the lubrication stuff. Yeah, we used to try that with the ethanol cars, and it didn't seem to make a difference. They still gunk up, and
It's easier to put that slimy pump gas in there.
yeah. Unfortunately,
All right. HP tuner. Well, he's talking about he should just get this one here. He should just buy all your drive-by-wire stuff for HP tuners. He's asking what the tricks are for like an O2 6-wire unicorn electronic throttle body idling, and what tables do you? That's highly specific. There, we're not going to go into that. That's a giant can of worms. Yeah. This is a good one. Considering your business model is focused highly on the Evans Performance Speed Academy, which is broadcast and advertised on social media platforms, I'm a personal follower and love the content, by the way. I'd imagine that has been extremely beneficial for you and others alike. What kind of
yeah. We have
question? It basically explained what you do. That was strange. Maybe I didn't get it. Specifically referring to free content from random internet user. I must have this stuff copied wrong wherever I got it. Oh, people are saying, would Jeff be willing to comment on the EPA crackdown and the adverse effects? As far as I can remember, you were the first guy to get cannoned with that.
I think I was the first individual.
It was kind of like maybe that'll happen. Maybe it was kind of people weren't worried, and then they were like, "Oh shit."
Yeah. I'm not sure why it happened to me exactly, specifically me.
Someone didn't like you.
Well, it could be our business. Our business
I just
was.
threw that out there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I always was, like somebody fucking ratted me out, but I don't know who that would be. I think the way we did Evans tuning, it broadcasted out as larger than so it was my wife, myself, and then we had, a few employees when we were the biggest kind of production going at Evans Tuning. And we did everything in a way, at least this is kind of the way I interpret it, that people would see us and think, well, they're fucking huge. They're like an AMS or like a, like a big company doing all this, big builds, and they're doing all this stuff, and they must have like, all these employees. And I think
You're just
we
efficient.
might have, well, we just, yeah, I mean, it wasn't that case. It's just, we're small business, but I think on the internet, because the internet is so, you can make yourself
true.
look
It's
like what?
whatever it is, it's true.
Yeah. So I think they honed in on me because I think it's because I checked so many boxes. If they're looking through, they went in, and so it kind of started where they were going to the manufacturers, and they're going around and meeting with them. And I think they were getting lists of dealers. Who are their dealers? Who are you selling to? And I think my name kept coming up because I was a dealer for everybody, and I was tuning everything at the time.
Easy.
And
so if they couldn't catch you on one, they had ammunition on 6 different ECUs and customer base.
Yeah, I think perhaps that's why. I don't know, but yeah, I ate a big shit salad on that. It sucked. 2 or 3 years with a lawyer, and I never paid attention to anything in the government. I didn't care about like politics. I just didn't give a shit. And until that happened, I'm like, motherfucker. And then I just because you don't think the federal government's going to come out and directly affect you.
Yeah, like why? That's a joke. Why would they do that?
Yeah.
That's how I thought of it until I heard about you, and I was like, damn, they're out there doing it.
So when we had to get an attorney, and it can't just be any attorney. It has to be an environmental law attorney, and it's very specific and niche. And then you have to find a good one. And so we found one, and we went, and the EPA, so there was multiple EPA federal agents on this conference call with my attorney, and I'm sitting in his office, and I'll never forget. We got a hold of the attorney. You're like, what do you think it's going to be? He's like, well, it could be anything. They could just be asking some questions. We'll do a conference call with them and see. The conference call started with the EPA attorney citing this conference calls to, talk about you're in violation of the Clean Air Act. And he's talking about how many, like a couple hundred violations. And he's like, section this, he's like going, for like a minute or two. And your fine's going to be totaling in excess of 1.4 million. I'm like, what the fuck?
Good luck.
What just happened?
Where's that coming from?
I was like, I looked at my lawyer. I was like, are they fucking kidding me right now?
Yeah, that's
like,
a huge
my wife and I were sitting in the thing. We're just like, this isn't happening right now. Jeez. And yeah, so 2 or 3 years fighting it, going back and forth. I mean, it got settled, but it's just, no one's safe. No one's safe. No, so
it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a good one. We always like to, after a bunch of serious ones, we like to do someone ask for all of them. So they say, ice cream and pizza question. What's your favorite ice cream and what's your favorite pizza? I like to break it up with things.
Pizza, ice cream. I like the like a chocolate vanilla swirl. If I'm doing a cone, they usually.
How do you go?
I haven't had one in years. Yeah, they're just pizza. I like white pizza with mushrooms.
Huh.
Yeah.
What and then what's your worst catastrophic failure that you've seen, and worst nightmare customer, if you can share?
Where do I start?
Should we do another episode that's just
oh God, I could tell so many stories you wouldn't even believe.
Next Friday, guys, nightmare customers. But I'll have 5 people on. None of you will be able to finish.
Dude, I think the craziest situation, I have 2 of them. 2 of them, these are pretty good ones. One, there was a guy with a TSX. It was turbocharged, and he drove up from like Maryland with the car. Him and his buddy came, and real clean TSX. It was almost like a show car. It was all white, pristine, everything super nice, tidy, real nice install. Guy was like, legitimate. He wasn't a big douchebag. Everything was cool. Tuned the car. Everything was fine on the dyno. Made probably like 20, 30 pulls getting it calibrated. We take the car off the dyno and we go just to drive it, make sure it's smooth before he heads back, 4-hour drive to Maryland. We get up the road probably about a mile and a half. And I say to him, he's driving and I'm, kind of looking at the laptop and I'm looking out the hood. I'm like, dude, I think there's smoke coming out your hood. And he's like, no. I'm like, yeah, I think you should pull over. Like, I think there might be a fire. He's like, no, there's no way. And I'm like, all right, well, just pull over. There's like a spot. There's like a kind of a turnaround. Like you can kind of swing wide up in my shop. So he swings around on the road and he kind of pulls over. He pops the hood. As soon as he opens the hood, the flames shoot out of the hood, like 6 feet out. Like it's like full blown fucking fire. This dude is panicking. He's like, what do we do? What do we do? And I'm like, man, I was like, pour whatever you have in the car on it. He's pouring fucking coffee. It's a show car. He's pouring fucking coffee on this thing. And then he's like, what do I do? And I'm like, the fire's not going out. I take my laptop, I unplug it from the car. I'm like, I'm not fucking getting my laptop burned down in this fucking car. I was like, it was summertime and it was dry. I was like, take dirt and start throwing dirt at it. Cause I'm like,
Something
it could
to smother
it, right?
Take
Like,
your
and
shirt
so
off or something. I don't know.
we're digging in the dirt and we're just throwing dirt in this guy's engine bay, right? So next thing you know, this old shitty truck pulls up next to us. These two guys, they're like, what's wrong? And he's like, it's on fire. I need anything. Give me some water. The guy gives him like Mountain Dew and like some other shit. We're like bombing. He's like bombing all this shit and it's still on fire. The lady across the street, so it's like kind of like a 2-lane road, and the lady across the street at a house, she comes down out of her drive.
Sounds like a Family Guy skit.
Dude, so the lady goes, she's like, it's on fire. He's like, I know. He's like, call the police, call the fire department. She's like, it's gonna burn to the ground. Just let it go. he's freaking out. Finally, another car pulled up and they had like a big bottle of water. We put the fire out. So the fire's out. And I'm like, I'm just looking at this thing. There's dirt in the fucking engine bay. There's coffee. There's Mountain Dew. It's a fucking mess. Like, it just looks disgusting. And the guy's like,
it's a vending machine throw up.
Yeah. So the guy's like, what am I going to do? I got to get home. My wife can't find out. I'm like, how are we going to get it from here to the shop 2 miles down? He tries to start the car. It's drive-by-wire. It fried all the wires at the firewall, which is the main harness. I'm like, there's like 60 wires burnt, dude. You aren't going anywhere. He's like, I got to get home. My wife can't find out. I'm like, you better call a tow truck.
Yeah, I don't know. So I don't see how this is my problem.
So we tow it back to the shop. And he's like, listen, I can't let my wife know no matter what. He's like, can I borrow a pair of dikes and some heat shrink and some solder? I'm going to try to fix my harness. I'm like, all right, whatever, man. Like, I had another appointment. So he's outside in the parking lot, cutting the harness apart and just going piece by piece, wire by wire, rebuilding the harness. Somehow this fucking thing still runs. Like, he gets it, puts it, right? So he leaves, he gets home. And like, I shit you not, the next day he goes, hey, I'm the guy with the car that the guy that the car caught on fire. He's like, so my nav screen doesn't display vehicle speed right. What do you think that is? I'm like, dude, are you fucking kidding me right now?
Ever
like,
since you tuned the car, my nav doesn't work.
Yeah, ever since your car like almost burned to the ground. And then I think one of the more ridiculous situations was there's like a group of Honda kids that I tuned for years. They have like their ring.
You were like, the stories I'm like, yeah, you tune Honda shit. So,
dude, it's crazy. But this is one of the crazy ones. So this guy, Hector, he's like the ringleader for all these cars that were coming up to the shop. Yeah. And he had a nitrous car. It was like a B series nitrous car, and it's on S300. And he's built cars before. He knows what he's doing, and whatever. So he brings the car up, and I always ask, what nitrous jet's in it? Is it jetted right? Have you checked your jets? Yeah, it's all good. All right. We tune it on motor, it's fine. First pull, turns the bottle on, let the bottle heater go, get warmed up. I go do the pool. Literally, the car goes into nitrous for a fraction of a second. I mean, a fraction of a second. It exploded. All of the rods went on the floor, like the whole entire block. Like the hole was
It's
like
like
the
that
entire
Diesel
front of.
video where it throws half the
Yes,
block and just spits all the pieces everywhere.
yeah, legitimate. It was vaporized. The throttle body, there was a he had an intake on it, like a cold air intake or whatever. The nitrous hit, it shot the rods out all within, like, it was like I just literally just sat there in awe just what happened because it was so quick. The intake shot off with like a 20-foot fireball behind it and blew like across the shop. And I literally was like, I got out of the car, there's coolant, oil everywhere, smoke everywhere. I'm like, dude, did you check the nitrous jet? He's like, no, I know I did. He's like, my boy put it in. It's good. He takes it out. There's no nitrous jet at all in it. It's just straight into the motor. That was one of many, but like that was kind of crazy. The fireball was impressive. It was like 20-foot flame, legit. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I always look at jets, and man, it's been years since I nicked like a ringland on something. And maybe, I don't know, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks ago. I said to someone like, yeah, you have Turbo LS. I'm like, yeah, you have like BR7s. The most thing I'm like, is it gapped really tight? Is it like 18? And they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like BR7s. And they're like, yeah. Well, after like, I had a really conservative pump gas because it was going to be a flex tune, pump and then flex. And I was really safe on ignition and it did good. And I dumped in a little bit more. Like I wasn't even close to where they normally are very happy. And it was like smoking on decel on the second hit. And I'm like, oh, what the hell? Like it wasn't before. So I'm like, oh, we should look. And we temp the cylinders quick and we can see, we pull the plugs and they're like, oh, this one's oily. I wasn't there. And I'm like, oh, let me see it. It's like an Iridium 55, like like a TR55IX.
Yeah.
So it's hotter than stock.
Yeah.
In a turbo car. And he's like, yeah, my friend. And I'm like, okay, yeah. I guess I'm gonna have to make people pull plugs. I mean, Anyway.
Yeah.
Elmo with the mushroom cloud meme. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Where Elmo's standing there and there's like a nuke going off near him. That's what people are talking about. The nitrous thing was like you with the Elmo meme.
Oh, yeah, basically. Yeah.
Was his name really Hector?
it legitimately is Hector, yeah.
Oh, good. What's your favorite digital dash solution for a Max ECU if you have one? I guess they don't have good ones, or there's too many shitty ones.
I mean, I use AIM dashes are great. I mean, all the AIM stuff works really well for most every system. So AIM's usually what I go to. There's obviously all kinds of options, but the TFT display on the AIMs are nice. The newer stuff's nice.
And then, how good is closed loop fueling on Max ECU? Is it as good as a Holley?
Yeah, most of the processor speed's quick. And as long as your PID gains are dialed right, yeah, it's fast. You can
really fast.
Yeah, you can do anything you want with it, similar to Holley. Yeah.
And this one is how do you tune exhaust VVT for the most power? And have you seen a trend for optimal position with boost? This is my friend that does the 4200 stuff, and he saw some interesting things while doing VVT, like back pressure would move around and amount of ignition timing. So
yes. So I mean, if it's a turbo engine, when you're moving your VVT, you're dialing in more or less overlap with your cam position. On a turbo setup, you typically run a bunch of retard to get your exhaust mass flow up. So the goal is to push your intake charge through. You have a bunch of advance on your intake, and on your exhaust, you're retarding it a bunch. You're getting that overlap, as much as overlap as you can. You're basically pushing through, getting a blow-through effect. You're getting your manifold pressure to push out your exhaust, to increase your exhaust mass flow, to spool your turbo quicker. And as soon as you're getting about to that mid-range point, you start to reel it back in and pretty much tighten it down to almost nothing. You're pretty much, it's going to depend on the motor. It really depends on if you have a small turbo with high back pressure, that could obviously change. If you have a bigger turbo, sometimes you can get away with leaving a little bit more retard on your exhaust phasing. It kind of depends on what you're what you're dialing in. Same thing with naturally aspirated, but typically you're rolling back that retard to zero up top, get rid of that overlap. And in terms of knock, in a turbo engine, when you do have that exhaust mass flow up, typically your cylinder pressure drops a little bit, and typically you can run a little bit more advanced when you're going after more retard position or cam phasing on the exhaust. So, and again, whenever I'm doing it, I'm typically watching knock sensor per cylinder and monitoring everything at the same time. So I actually know what I'm getting away with. I'm not guessing it. I hate guessing on spark timing. So I hate it. It's like playing with fire. So
He says, awesome, thanks. I always love hearing second opinions.
yeah, no problem.
My buddy Chris says, yep, them Ks sweep it in every 5 degrees of angle and overlay to build the baddest curve.
Yep, lots of gain with cam timing for sure.
And then someone here is saying, have you tuned many E85 cars with no intercooler? And if you did they live or die? And some act like it was almost the same cooling as M1, and some act like it'll burn down first pass.
From doing a lot of stock turbo cars on ethanol with stock intercoolers, so your air temps, you're running a lot more boost, and air temps definitely go through the roof. Like you're picking up, 180, 200 degree air temps if you're watching it, through the core, a stock core. Like I'm talking about like a stock WRX or something similar. You're picking up a ton of air temperature, and you're running ethanol. It's definitely not as important to have a good intercooler in that situation, but I have directly swapped intercoolers to a better core. So in terms of intercooler, like poor intercooler or good intercooler, there's still power gain to be had. And typically, if you're watching knock, the engine starts to become way less knock sensitive on, good intercooler setup. I personally would always run an intercooler of some sort on ethanol. Methanol is a different beast. You can definitely get a little bit more, get away with more on a methanol car, but I personally would always run some type of intercooler. So
yeah, I've only done like maybe 5 non-intercooled cars, and it's usually ones where people aren't going to beat it up, aren't really going to drag race it.
I guess it depends on your boost too.
Yeah.
It really depends on how much boost
you're
you're running.
and you're cranking them. Yeah, inlet air temp without it, blah blah blah. And like you said, how much rise? If it's 200-degree rise over 15 seconds, it's fucking terrible. So
yeah, it doesn't matter. You're gonna lose power, and if you're watching knock again, it's gonna start knocking its out. It'll knock on ethanol, and you'll see it, and you'll lose power. So
I want to hear. That's what I'm going to do with my all motor combo next. I want to hear nails in a paint can with ethanol.
You got to really push it.
I'm going to find it. Don't worry. Is there an advantage? This is good. Is there an advantage to running 2 smaller gates on each bank of a V8 car relative to 1 large gate, perfectly blended in? He says he ran a 50 millimeter last season and didn't have issues. He's curious if he should change things up to, 2 small ones. Is good or bad, or as long as you can control boost, it doesn't matter?
I mean, it's going to come down to if you're watching your EMAP pressure, exhaust manifold pressures, you'll find if you're running 2 small gates, chances are your surface area of your valve of total. So if you're looking at two 38 mil gates, let's say, it's probably the smallest you can really run, and you're running a single 50, you have more surface area on the 38s. You'll find that your exhaust manifold pressure will technically be a little bit lower when those gates are open if you're not trying to slam the gate shut and build a lot of boost. At that point, it doesn't matter. Like once your valves are shut and you're trying to go after all the boost, it's not going to matter. But what you'll find is sometimes you can get a little slower spool with a larger valve size because you have more surface area to bleed off your exhaust pressure. So if you're monitoring your EMAP and you can kind of keep track of that, you can see there is a difference there. In the import stuff, like the drag cars, if we're trying to go after a shitload of boost, you usually run a smaller gate, and you usually get a little bit quicker spool out of it because your exhaust manifold pressure, you're not bleeding off, as much at the lower level when you're trying to regulate things. So
yeah, that's interesting. It's totally opposite of people always say you want to have too much gate most of the time, but I think that's in a car where you want to not run 60 pounds.
Well, only if you're having issues controlling the boost. If you're able to maintain, if you're putting in a 10-pound spring and you're getting 10 pounds, and you're not getting creep, then there's no need to go up and size the gate up any larger than you need to.
But it's
you don't
an
need to go
interesting
jump
theory to go lower to get better, to get that little bit of extra spool. It's neat to hear you're talking about the 5% stuff.
Yeah, no, it makes a difference. And like I said, if you look at and monitor EMAP, you'll see it. You'll see your EMAPs slightly lower, and that mirror, and it just.
And when that's lower, your horsepower is usually better, and your outlet temperature is usually better, right?
It can be, yeah. It depends. Sometimes your spool time will suffer just a little bit. It'll spool just a little bit slower. So, I mean, personally, if you're not having issues with creep, don't change it. So
this guy's been asking this for a while. I gotta ask. He says, "Do you need or do you run a blow-off valve on a turbo car?"
I always do. I mean, it depends on what type of racing you're doing. People don't run blow-off valves on drag cars. Like a drift car, that won't live more than 10 minutes on the track without a blow-off valve. Pedaling, yeah, literally just trash the shafts, break them, eat the bearings out of the turbo. Have to. I've had drift guys go, "I'm not running a blow-off valve." I'm like, okay, whatever. Put a bunch of turbos in the car, so they add a blow-off valve. And a drag car, again, it's if you're wide open the whole run and you lift at the end, you're gonna get that one time you're getting the backfeed through the compressor, and it'll probably handle that.
I'm doing a 1,000-footer and I finally lift at the end. Doesn't matter if it's sneezing out of its face.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
A good one here is my buddy Robert Young, the guy that owns Force Performance.
Yeah.
He says, "Please talk about the new style of GM 18 plus torque target based ECUs."
Well,
is that like a whole new strategy that's a pain in the ass that I don't know about?
So the GM, the Gen 5, so I can't speak of like the C8 Corvette. I don't know anything about any of the mapping on that new, but an 18 and newer, everything is heavily airflow based. Well, it's torque based, but everything is airflow based. So when you're calibrating, you have to calibrate the mass airflow and then the VE at the same time. They have to be done in unison because it calls on, and even if you're trying to tune it mass airflow based, it's still calling on and looking at your VE model at any given time. And that's a virtual VE. So it's coefficients that are blended together into a table that you would interface as a VE table. It as as a VE table. But when you're calibrating those, the number one problem that I see in the torque-based models of people having problems with transmission shifting or drive-by-wire problems, it usually comes down to the airflow models not being dialed in together. And if you have a separation of even 5-10%, it can lead to all kinds of problems. Usually under the transient events, it's switching over and looking at the VE-based model. And then steady state, it usually tries to run the MAF model. But the torque is all based on knowing your maximum brake torque reference and then your actual spark timing. And then it's looking at your airflow model heavily, and it's looking at your command at lambda. And knowing all of that, it can figure out at any given time your torque. Everything speaks in language of torque. So if you don't have, and what you're typically interfacing with in terms of calibrating, if you add bolt-ons to the car or a supercharger or a turbocharger or whatever, you need to dial the airflow model in. The number one problem I see people have is they just put it in a MAF mode and they don't dial the speed density in, and it starts creeping and leading into problems. So you'll get throttle closure, you'll get all kinds of torque issues, and it just goes back to like the fundamentals, the basics. It's just like the airflow model is not right.
The guy who owns the dyno has a 14 Silverado regular cab short bed, and then it has the L83, and it has a
Hmm.
Whipple on it.
Hmm.
And I'm like, I don't want to touch this. I'm not interested. I don't know, and I don't want to test on your vehicle. And he must have had like 5 different places try, and
Yeah.
no matter what, the trans would shift like garbage,
Yes.
or the throttle when you floor it, it would just whir. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
know it's torque based stuff, but I don't even want to mess with it and blow the thing up for no reason. But I thought it was funny how many people could not get it going. And now
But
it's at a place you probably know. It's near us. I don't know anything about them. It's called Tune Time Performance.
yeah, I think they're Jersey.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
They
somewhere.
do a lot of the late model stuff. Yeah, late model GM
Yeah,
stuff.
so he has it there, and he's heard a lot of good stuff about that.
Hmm.
So we'll see how that ends up. It'll be nice if he can. He's had this truck forever and can't floor the damn thing for most of its
Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah. That's the probably the biggest problem with doing any of the newer GM and Fords, even Dodge stuff. To calibrate them properly, it takes you can't whack them in an hour and get them done. It takes quite a bit of time and driving cycles to populate the data. If you're using HP tuners, for example, and going through your histograms and setting up all your filters to properly calibrate everything together in terms of the MAF and speed density, just for example, or the VE, to get that airflow model as tight as possible so that everything downstream falls in line, so the torque model falls in line. Most of the people who are going to be calibrating and tuning, and I mean, I know because I've been doing it forever, you can't, not that you can't spend 4 or 5 hours on a car, but no one wants to do that. And this stuff takes quite a bit of time and driving cycles to go through and get everything down as tight as possible. It's just not, you can't do it in an hour. So that's why I think a lot of people will go, like I was mentioning before, they'll put it into a math mode with the GM ECU. So they'll be just running half of the airflow model. And you get into trans problems when a shift's commanded because the trans tables are in language of torque. So it's looking at a torque
Yeah,
reference.
I know about that.
And
Yeah, but it's
and
just
and,
annoying
and
that no one could really help us.
it's most likely because they're not spending the calibration time. It just, you can't do it quick. So it's the
And I
name of the
don't have
game.
the patience. I don't have the patience. I don't want to learn,
Yeah,
and I don't care. I just
yeah,
don't want to go there. I'm like, yeah, give me
yeah,
some Gen 3 LS garbage with a Holly and
yeah.
nothing
Simple.
else. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
really. Like I said, it's a hobby, so I don't want to be accountable for a brand new truck that I'm expected to make run great, and I'm just not going to.
yeah.
Oh, someone had a. Oh, Chris says, wait till you get to the 19 plus. It's even more fun. This guy goes, Jeff, do you have a MySpace?
MySpace.
We talked about it earlier. I think we might have been offline or just muted for the first 10 minutes. But Jeff has a social media account that hasn't been touched in 20 years. So
20
you
years.
just don't use any of them. Even if you did have one,
No, no,
it's not
no.
important.
Yeah. Nope.
There's something else here? Oh, Potatoes on here. There's a guy that's on all my live streams. His name is Potato R33, and his questions are legendary. What's your favorite tool in your toolbox that you absolutely have to have? He's the guy that's great for breaking up the serious questions.
Nice. Tool, huh? I gotta think. Multimeter, probably.
Oh,
I'm
nice.
always using it all the time.
Does
Like
it have to be a
literally
good one, or is a dollar Harbor Freight one good also?
for years and years and years. I've when I started out, probably 15 years, I had Craftsman tools. I had, a $10, $20 multimeter. I had the most basic stuff tuning forever. And the stuff, I mean, it works. Like you don't need, the only time you'd needed a fancy scope, a fancy meter would be if you're trying to do something with like amp tests, for example. Like you got to have something that,
A clamp,
or if you're
yeah.
trying, yeah, like there's, so it just depends on what you're doing with it. But if you're doing continuity checks and volt tests and, voltage, whatever, you don't need anything fancy. A lot of the
$5
basics.
special.
Yeah.
buy
Yeah.
$25 worth of stuff, get this yellow multimeter for free.
Yeah, it works.
Those are great. You drop it, you kick it across the floor. You have
Yeah.
three. It's like the tape measures.
Yeah.
Put one in every corner of the shop.
Yeah.
Where's something else was here? Oh, one of them I can remember was, what ECU would you like to see some sort of revamp on? Like, what's a capable one that the software sucks, or what's a good software one that the hardware sucks? Like, on the top of your whatever you can think of, like, what is badly deserving something you can suggest?
I mean, Fuel Tech, I in my opinion, needs to have more user adjustability in the software. I mean, because it's so popular and everybody's getting into it, and
And
it's
it's
like
good
the
other than you can't do what you want to do, like you were saying earlier.
functionality wise, it works. It doesn't do anything that you're not telling it to do. You know, it doesn't do stupid shit where it's like old school AEM stuff. I mean, I probably have months of my time lost in troubleshooting bullshit with all the old school AEM stuff. But yeah,
Yeah,
Fuel
I
Tech, I
heard that
think,
that stuff was a disaster. Even early Infinity was terrible, but I think it's all
yeah, it
firmware now,
was.
right?
Yeah, the new
Yeah.
stuff. Well, the new stuff, I don't think they're going to do anything more with it in terms of development. Because Holly bought AEM,
Oh,
so
I
that
think my
happened.
rep said that.
Mhm.
So yeah, they're just buying everybody.
Yeah, and so that's. I don't think the development wise are going to go any further with it. But yeah, I mean, firmware wise, Infinity's improved a lot since when it came out. I wouldn't use it for the first probably year or two. I tend to be that way with standalone stuff. Like when a system comes out, I usually shy away from dealing with it for at least 6 months to a year, because it's always just like you're the guinea pig and working out all the bugs, and it's super frustrating.
It's
But
just like first year of a car. It's just that's a very
yeah,
IT thing too. I don't want to
yeah,
touch. New operating system comes out and people are like, "Wow!" and then they're like, "All my shit's gone," and I had no idea that would happen. I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
"Are you older than 2 years old?" Because it's exactly what happens. Early
Yeah,
adopter of a phone. Oh, this phone has issues. No shit. No shit,
yeah,
it does. What is
yeah.
my buddy Chris goes? If you had the choice of getting kicked in the dick every morning or having an H22, what shoes would you prefer they use?
At age 22,
Fucking
it's
Chris.
crazy. I still tune those freaking things. People still like they love
I
them.
think you missed it, Chris. His first car was an automatic Prelude.
Oh boy.
Oh, my buddy Joe asked, how do you feel about how sad are you that H22s are basically extinct?
I don't care.
You
That's
have no
like
emotional attachment to the
no, none,
VC or
none,
the engine.
no, none at all.
What else is in here? Oh, well, I'll ask one from the. Uh, what's your favorite vehicle you have tuned, or maybe one that you were expecting a low number out of that was extremely good, that kind of thing? You have something just
Mm,
blindside you, like this is going to be garbage, and then it was awesome.
I've had quite a few things like that over the years. Things surprise me. I'm trying to just think of like something that stands out.
I agree with that too. Like, I've had a bunch of cars where they are just pouring white smoke like a bad power stroke. They make
Yeah,
700 horsepower, and I just laugh the whole time.
yeah,
Smoking
yeah,
under throttle, like pouring smoke. Like, this is awesome. No one
yeah,
cares.
yeah.
I don't
I
think you'd
can't.
get away with that, but I'm with the person, and I'm
No,
like, man, this is pouring smoke, and we're both laughing.
no. I would definitely not get away with
Like I
that.
said, I'm like some weird Switzerland version of tuning and internet, which I
Yeah,
enjoy
yeah, yeah.
profusely. Nothing strikes a bell. Just it's probably because you've
No.
done so many Hondas, and there's like you do 10. If you do 10 in a day, two of them look like absolute shit, but make 500 horsepower.
There's been a lot of that stuff. I've had. I mean, it goes through. There's so many cars. It's been like thousands and thousands of cars. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
I'm sure there's been like plenty of stuff that.
how many do you do a year? Like 220 cars a year?
Probably double that. Because
Wow.
I do a lot of e-tuning.
Oh, okay.
So I deal with a
It's
lot of
all
stuff
just like this
internationally.
now in your brain. It doesn't.
Yeah, I yeah. I mean, I'm doing more like the remote stuff than I am even in house.
Oh,
And in
nice.
some ways, I kind of prefer that because like you're not waiting for somebody to change the spark plugs. You're not waiting for somebody to go and switch the fuel in the car, or
Hmm.
like you mean they're dealing with it on their end, and it's like they shoot the logs back and it's ready to go and keep calibrating, and so yeah.
See, people don't know you have that video. I guess we just have to link him. Have him
Oh
share
boy.
things that piss off your tuner the most when you come in to tune their car.
Oh, that's easy.
And Joe has, we've talked about this on the other radio shows with Joe Simpson. And yeah, but what are your pet peeves? All of them?
Dude, I dead battery, low gas, coolant not bled. Uh, hey, can you change my oil before we tune? Um, oh, man,
Anything.
I've had I've had people show up with timing belts, like a B series or D series. Yo, before we can get started tuning, can you throw this timing belt on for me? Like crazy shit. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. I'm not doing that shit. Like, no, like we're here for a tuning appointment. What the fuck? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's if you can't bring the car, start it and running with the basic mechanical things taken care of, like car doesn't overheat, the car has oil in it, it has oil pressure, it has a battery that's charging, like with the alternator, like just it's the basic shit. You have fuel in the car.
I'll
You're
always
not low on
remember,
fuel.
like, I had a little bit of an overheating issue before I brought my bubble turbo eBay bubble over to you, and that
Yeah.
was funny because I tuned it ahead of time, and then I had you tune it anyway just to be a troll. And I was like, "Oh, you like you quit making power where I quit tuning it too." And then I'm like, "Oh, where'd you end up? This much boost and this much timing?" And you're like, "What the fuck? Why did you even bring this here?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, I just wanted to hang out and just fucking no reason." But
Yeah.
yeah, mine was like overheating and weird, and I did like a thermostat. And then I remember leaving super early. Like I'm one of those people that's nervous and I need to leave early. And I like
Yeah.
one two'd the balls out of it, leaving near my house and broke the fucking shifter off in the floor. Like snapped it off. I was like, you gotta be shitting me. I have to go up
Nice.
there. Yeah. I'm like, I can't believe I just broke the fucking shifter off in this stupid ass car.
That was many years ago now. That was probably what, 8, 10 years ago?
Yeah, I'd have to look. Yeah, I
Were you at
built.
my old shop?
No, it was the new one.
Were you?
Yeah, it was the
Okay.
new
I've been there
one.
for about 12 years or so, maybe. 2009, I was in there.
Yeah, I remember. I think I brought
Years.
plugs and we swapped them like midway through.
Oh, yeah.
And I
I
remember
think I do
you have
remember.
that giant box fan, and we just put everything on it. And I'm like, this is a nice tool bench. And then I just asked stupid shit the whole time. You had the face where you're like, go the fuck away.
No, I probably was like, how is this guy not asking stupid questions? Like, people ask the dumbest shit, so.
Well, that's what I would just say shit like, I'm like, oh, so 50 degrees, or I was just trying to be that guy, and
Yeah.
it wasn't working out. What is how do things like being a regular tuner, does he missed out on the nah, that's one of the good ones my friend had asked up here was how was your transition from, or how was it like opening the school videos online. I know Joe Simpson's doing the same thing. He has a thing, it's called Tune the Trilogy, which is like the Holly
Okay.
Sniper, Holly like all the Holly stuff, because people are
Yeah.
Holly's so hot right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, it was a big transition. I mean, you go from tuning 6 days a week, and then you're like, I need to film, and you got build the content and do all of it. It's weird when you're used to just being at the shop for 10, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, to transitioning to like now you're talking to yourself in front of a camera, and it's just it's just like it's weird. and
Well, like you said to
and
me, you're like someone's interacting with me in front of the video here.
oh,
I'm
it's
not
super
used to
super
this.
super weird. I'm usually just talking to myself into a camera, like it's, or like it's just, yeah. But I mean, the transition, it was a learning curve, a big learning curve, because I had limited filming and editing experience,
Hmm.
so I knew what I wanted to do, and then it just trying to put it together, like making it look professional and making so. Um, Yeah, I mean, it's probably a year or two till I got like comfortable enough where I was like, okay, yeah, this is like normal, but yeah,
Someone paid $5 to ask this question.
oh boy,
So we're
oh
gonna
boy,
ask it right away. Does
oh boy,
pineapple belong on pizza?
pineapple on pizza, that's awful.
That's a no.
Uh, no, that's
Strong no, ladies and gentlemen.
no.
And then how much injector do I need for 700 wheel on a 5.3 with E85 with a GT 500 and a Dodge D100? This is, I mean, I do this stuff all the time, so he's probably asking me. But a GT 45 is like the $100 eBay turbo that chokes
Yeah,
at like 710 to the tire. So you're not even gonna make 700 on E. But yeah, I don't know. An 80 pounder would probably be fine for that. Decap stock
yeah,
injectors are 75 pound, so just do that because the turbo is just going to be laying over hard at like 500. Sometimes you can push it into the 600 range. That's what I think. You probably don't touch that shit.
yeah. I was gonna say like 1,000 cc, 9,500 pound injector would probably do it. I usually oversize stuff a little bit.
Well, also
Just
you do a lot of everything, so
I
that's
do
only
everything.
fair. I was gonna
Yeah,
say, oh well, 4 cylinder stuff, you kind of want to go big, but it's the same thing. It's just
yeah,
double the injector for a V8.
yeah, yeah. Flow rate and horsepower are is easy to calculate. So
Yeah, I always tell
yeah.
people to throw those GT. I wish they would stop making those GT45s. Terrible. For almost the
I'm
same
sure I tune
price.
with it, but
Yeah, it's that garbage, giant, generic looking. It's like a Wish.com diesel
oh
turbo,
boy,
and it was awesome 10 years ago when you couldn't get a damn thing, but now like
yeah,
Billet 7875 Gen 2 from VS Racing will make 950 wheel on a V8 car on
huh,
E, and it'll light way faster, and it's physically smaller, and it's better in every way possible, but people want that piece of garbage, but whatever.
yeah.
Uh, what is this? People were asking about locked out fuel pressure for like all motor cars. Would you bother hooking up the reference for an all motor car?
Well, it depends.
Is it like an OCD thing where you just like to have it connected, or does it matter in the long run? Or
it's
again, it depends.
it depends on what you're going after. So if you have an all motor car and you have sequential fuel injection and you're able to go after injection timing,
Hmm.
if you have a really large fuel injector, will give you more time to move that injector point, end of injection, if it's port referenced, end of injection based, moving your EOI around to get your spray to hit the valve when you want. So you can pick up power on an NA motor by moving your injection timing around. The reason why I'm mentioning this is if you have a big injector, you would want to have vacuum reference to the regulator because you'll be able to deal with the injector and being able to control it a little bit better at the slightly lower fuel pressure at idle and part throttle. Um, and you'd get the benefit of running a big injector and being able to move that end of injection timing around, potentially picking up power there. I've seen some motors, not so much on the 4 cylinder stuff, but on V6 and V8 motors. There's a considerable amount of power you can find in injection timing and drivability. You can sometimes improve drivability pretty drastically. And um, I would vacuum reference the regulator. If it was, if it was me building an all motor project, I would run a big injector so I have more time to move that EOI around at higher RPM, try to find some power, and then get the benefit of controlling the injector a little bit better on the bottom end.
I've heard that you want to be under like 40% to get the best amount of phasing.
It's
You
roughly.
get over half, you start losing the
Yeah.
resolution window or whatever you would call
Well,
it.
your cycle time starts to drop, and then it's not going to matter as much of where you're spraying the fuel, where it's getting in. So yeah.
I have just started learning how to do that, and it's mostly because Holly has implemented a calculator in their latest revisions, and you can type in the cam events and hit
Yep.
calculate a table. And I have,
Yep.
it's a huge difference. Like if you have a set of 210s in a car, huge difference for idle quality, smell, drivability, and a bunch of times I've seen cars pick up like 40 wheel on a turbo car with just being phased. And I was like, wow, that's nice for a freebie, typing in some numbers and clicking OK.
Yep. Yeah, once you get your injection timing down, I mean, this goes for any engine that you can move injection timing around. I typically calibrate everything with a fixed injection timing. Holly's a little bit different the way it references it, but typically if it's like a traditional EOI end of injection reference timing value, 360 is what you can put in for most any engine. It'll run pretty well. Calibrate your fuel model, airflow model, get it all dialed in, and then you can play with your end of injection timing, watch like your closed loop trims, and you can move it around to the point where you're finding that either if you're going after economy, you'll see where the closed loop trims are taking the fuel away up to a certain point where they kind of hit a wall as you're just changing your injection timing. Then once that's set, you can go back in and redo your fuel table, and that could be a 5 or 10% difference in your fueling that you've changed without initially touching your fuel table. And you can pick up, a bunch of economy just by mapping that out. Also, it improves your transient throttle, your accel throttle, because you're getting the fuel into the engine more efficiently. And
I've
as you're
noticed
having
that too, like
yes,
the throttle response is way better.
yep, you're not having to chase that transient event. It's more direct getting in. So yeah, I
Someone
usually
had
do
asked,
trial and error.
move just by moving them around. Yeah, I'm sure if I got better at it, it would be nice to, learn how to move those around a little bit to help out. But the calculator just does it, and I'm like, okay, cool.
It's probably splitting hairs at that point. Like
Yeah,
once you get
the
it close,
people say the
it's
same thing. Someone made like a custom Excel sheet, and they're like, "Oh, it's like 5% better," and I'm like,
eh.
well, okay, add a bigger turbo,
Usually I rough it in, and then I just manually do a little
interpolate
bit
or
trial and
whatever."
error. I trial and error it, and then I kind of sort it out that way.
Someone had
You
asked a
can
good
find it pretty quick.
question, and I can't. It was Savage Fabrication. He does a lot of diesel stuff, and he had asked like, it was something along the lines of, when is there going to be something splitting between like $1 million Bosch diesel ECU versus like a stock one? I wish I could find it. Let me. Is there anything keeping modern standalone systems from being able to be used on EFI diesel engines? Like a Holly or a Haltech on a diesel. What's the hold up there? That's a good question. I don't know.
I don't do a whole lot of diesel shit. I
Hard
would
to.
think it's gonna be controlling based on rail pressures, based on the hardware and technology is like for a direct injection gas motor. There's only a handful of standalones can even do it, and comparable dealing with the control strategies, drive the injector, and then deal with the pressures, and so it's probably hardware based, and demand. So you'd have to have enough people to want to pay for it, for somebody to put the money into it.
Hit up Haltech and see if they'll do it.
Yeah.
I know they love doing like custom firmware shit. I know you can call them, like if you have a car that has a totally different trigger wheel, they'll go in with you and log and make a firmware update for your trigger.
Yep.
So that's
A
stuff
lot of companies
maybe
will
he
do
should
that.
get interested in. He should start hooking up with someone like that, because Savage Fab guy is incredible diesel stuff. So I'm sure maybe they're just looking for you to cross that bridge.
Yeah.
I helped a guy tune a car, a small block Chevy. The engine dynoed 650 horsepower. He installed a GT45 on it and it made 380 rear wheel.
That's awesome.
100%. I believe it. It's just fucking garbage. It's good for like a 200 horsepower 5.3 and you want to make 460. 10 years ago, there was nothing better in my opinion, but a little bit after that, the 7875 and stuff came out, and that thing has been my bro for forever. But yeah. What did someone ask a good one here too? I'm looking. Oh, what is your thoughts on a decap injector?
I mean, as long as the flow rate is consistent,
You
it
don't
should be
care.
fine. Doesn't matter.
Some
Yeah.
people get very emotional about it, but because I've done a bunch of videos on it, and for like a budget option, it's incredible. You can take the stock
Mhm.
injectors 25, 28 pound out of a truck intake. And I've done 2 videos on how to decap them successfully. And there's a guy on Sloppy that's kind of like the go-to. He's not sponsored and nothing by anybody, and he has 2 ASNU machines, and he'll clean and flow them and give you a sheet. If you send, I mean, best case scenarios, you get 2 sets, 16, and then you decap and send them to him, and then he does like a 1% matched set. And they work great. They always average out to about 75 pounder. Some of the more rare part numbers can go to like 105 and 96 and something like that, but like the shittiest ones laying around can be 75 pounds, and that covers a lot of bases for
Yeah.
the budget turbo crew. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think they're great. Other people are like, oh, I won't touch on it. So some people, like I said, are very emotional.
Yeah. As long as they're consistent in flow rate's all that matters.
If fuel goes in.
Yeah.
The other one was this is one that I already have my answers to, but we're gonna hear what you have to say. When tuning a turbo combo for max safe power, uh, this is an in-tank pump, and I have different reasons for answering what I do too. For max safe power, would you start with a lower base pressure to not stress the fuel pump? Example, 43 pounds versus 58 pounds on a 4.8, 78, 75 Walbro 525 regular fuel truck rails and a 6 feed and return. Did you get all that?
In general, so if we're talking about fuel pump, just performance in general, I'm going to consider flow chart for the actual pump, amp draw for the pump. I'm going to consider max boost I'm going to be running, and then base pressure. And if you look at a lot of pumps, there's going to be that tipping point where, let's say you're running 30 pounds of boost, let's say you had 58-pound base, you're getting up there around 90 psi. You might find the amp draw is super high, 14, 18 amps, and you might find that the actual flow rate out of the pump either starts to decrease or it just kind of tapers at 80 and doesn't do much more past 80. Some of them have a bypass valve that'll open up and actually won't, it'll start to dump pressure. It depends on the pump. I personally, depending on what the power level would need and what the fuel pump can output, I would personally try to run a lower base pressure to start off with. I'd usually run a three bar, the 300 kPa, 43.5 psi to start off with, and then see where I'm end up for duty cycle, see where the, kind of the fuel system pans out at, and then look at the boost level. And if I need more, I will up the base pressure. And then obviously looking at the flow rate chart for the pump, because like you can keep turning up the base pressure. The difference that you're going to get out of the injector going from 3 to 400 kPa, 43 to 58 pounds, isn't astronomical difference in flow rate. So it's going to depend on, a bunch of factors. I try to run the lower base pressures for a lot of reasons. Most of the stuff I'm tuning runs huge injectors. So the lower the base pressure, easier it is to control this lower pulse widths, get a little bit better drivability, idle quality out of it. It really comes down to what the application is going to be. So
I would say similarly, almost all in-tank pumps nose pretty hard the 60 to 80 range. So I always tell people I've had some cars with 210s in them that we do like a 30 base, and they run great. It doesn't really bother them at all. But yeah, if you're gonna run, people always do that same thing where they want to run a crazy base to get their injector larger. And I'm like, well, you're already at the point where the pumps don't want to be, and then you're adding boost, so you're actually getting less fuel flow. And
less flow. Usually the best way to go about, I mean, the way I try to go about with the tuning is always integrating a fuel pressure sensor into the fueling strategy. So you'll do like injector pressure differential as a lookup for flow rate, for injector flow rate. So if you're dealing with a VE based fuel model and you have injector flow rate as, you know, your variable you're specifying, if you're integrating fuel pressure with it, your base pressure that you're looking up based on your fuel pressure sensor and your manifold pressure, so your differential pressure, it'll allow you to vary your base pressure. So if you're tuning the car out and you have your table set up that way and you're including fuel pressure in your calculations, you can change your base pressure wherever you want after you tune the car. And as long as your injector data is correct for that and your latency and all that's correct, you can move your base pressure around, experiment, and you don't have to sit there and retune the car each time. A lot of times I will do that because a lot of cars I do fuel pressure comped, and it just makes it so much nicer because or if there's a fuel pressure drop, it's already incorporating that into the fuel calculation. It's going, all right, the injectors.
Yeah, it's a good idea because almost all the Holley systems come with an oil pressure and fuel pressure setup. Yeah. So doing an offset would be, I mean, once you have a decent one, it probably applies to 90% of the cars if they're similar anyway.
Yeah, but that's you'd have to look at, I mean, with the Holley, that you would have to do an advanced table and an offset.
Yeah, that's what I
mean. Flow offset. Yeah, usually. So it depends on, like, okay, it's a Link or an Infinity. You can build your flow rate table out based on your base pressure, your injector differential pressure. So you can say at 30 pounds, the injector flows 800 cc. At 40 pounds, it flows, 900 cc. Keep going up and down as that fuel pressure changes. Your flow rate's constantly being updated in the calculation. So it's just the way to do it, for sure, the way to go about it, especially on a turbo car. I think like 85 to 90% of the cars I ever tune have a fuel pressure problem. Like every car has a fuel pressure problem. It's there.
Yeah, it's so easy to make power, in my opinion, now that almost everybody runs out of fuel. They're just not overdoing they're like, oh, this will be enough. I'm like, just get wild. There's no anymore with a decent ECU. You could have a gigantic injector as long as it's not a shitty injector. That's where people they're stuck in like the 90s with an FMU and an injector that just needs the idle at a 10.8. Like there's nothing else you can do about it. I had tuned a car, it had like some gigantic alcohol injectors. It was going to be a non-intercooled methanol car, and it had like Moran 550s in it or something like that, and he just ended up doing pump ethanol non-intercooled. And it was a 10.2 air fuel or off for me to do idle. And I'm like, this sucks because it's just it's filling your oil with fuel. Yeah. But that's, you're like 10% off. The car's off. You're like, cool.
Jesus.
This is cool. I mean, but it's a 550-pound injector. It was never meant to. But it had no. I mean, what's crazy is a 210 would probably have the resolution down there. It wouldn't care.
Mm-hmm.
But that thing pinned my dyno on like medium, but mine will top out at like 1500, and that thing like yawned out flatline on the dyno. It was like a 545 inch with a twin 91 Pro mods on it.
Oh damn!
It was some wild shit. I'm like, why'd you bring this to me? This is retarded.
Wow. Nice.
It only took like a few hits to make over 1500. I was like, damn, I don't even know what to. We're done basically. You have to make passes at the track. I was gonna ask you a good one, but this is my brain. It just goes flying out. So similarly, that depends on the pumps. A lot of in tanks don't like pressure. Some of the externals really don't give a shit, and they like pressure. And if you have an injector and a fuel pump that really like pressure, you can go far. Like I know, like a 4303 or most external pumps don't give a shit about pressure, and a 210 will grow to like a 360-pound injector at 100 psi. So yeah, you can get pretty wild.
Another good combination is to have a good intake and then an inline as a combo. So the intake feeds the inline, and you can usually stretch those out pretty far for power.
That's a good. I've always heard about that and never had
Yeah,
concrete. So it's nice
it
that
works
you.
good.
That's not the question I would have asked, but the answer I needed. So if you did like a 450 into a, what's a popular inline, like an AEM or a Bosch 044 clone, the AEM
Yeah.
380
Yep.
inline,
Yep.
what would you gain? I know, like, I would say two Walboro 450s are one of my favorites, is stacking
Mhm.
450s, because the
Mhm.
525, the amperage draw is like double, and
Yep.
then people say it heats up the fuel when you
Yep.
don't need it to. So 450s have less draw and less heat. But I
Yep.
know two of those will go basically 1,000 wheel, depending on someone's fuel system. Obviously, like, I've learned a larger line and other things thought out will go farther than the
Mhm.
same pumps and something that's not as thought out. But basically, like a 1,000 cc injector with pump ethanol with two 450s will basically make 900 to 1,000 to the tire.
Mhm.
So
You could
how?
probably see. So the inline pump gets boosted by the in-tank pump. So it'll have a boost in
Then
what
it's
it can
not
output.
suctioning. It's just.
Correct.
But I always wondered, like, if you're drawing through that 450, isn't that hindering you, or it's not enough to not do it?
It acts as a low side. So if you were to check the pressure coming out of the low side, we call it a low side pump, your in-tank pump, and you know against what's coming into the inlet of your
So the
inlet
flow
pump.
is through the roof because the pressure isn't there because the other one's
Correct.
drawing it. So the
Correct.
450 is pumping just like a surge tank where you're
Yep.
like, man, I must need three 450s to feed a three 450 surge tank, when in
Yep.
reality, one is good because it's 1 psi. It's flowing a
Right.
incredible amount.
Yeah. It's going to be more than that in
Ah.
pressure, but yeah.
So you could do
Yep.
1,000 to the tire with a 450 and like an 044 clone on
As
ease.
long as it's not an actual 044, like it's one like an AEM one,
That's
like a
what I,
size larger.
yeah, I
Yeah.
say the AEM is the only one I would trust anymore because it seems like there's more clones than there are real ones
Yeah.
after a certain year.
You can get away with running a lot higher base pressures too. It with
Oh,
an
nice.
inline in tank. So you can crank the base pressure up and it keeps going. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know that style pump doesn't give a shit about pressure as much as
Yeah.
the in tank. Oh, so
And then you're
that's
feeding
nice.
it.
Would you run both at the same time all the time then, or is one
Yes.
able?
Yep. That's how I used to do it.
Because you can't really push through the one without creating a massive restriction, and you can't really
Yep.
draw through the 450, right?
Yep.
That's not a bad idea. Because putting two, I see where people stagger they make like a SpaceX rocket to do two or three of those in a row, and I'm
Mhm.
like, man, it's so much money and fittings to just stack
Mhm.
those pumps and then have Y fittings to go in and out of each other. A 450 and the AEM just
Mhm.
stacked, yeah, way easier.
Mhm.
Well, dang, that's an option for sure. Because some people can't fit. There's some cars where you can't even put two fuel pumps in the tank.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. If you did when I've done it before, I usually mount the inline pump in the engine bay closer to the rail.
Ah, okay. Like
So
those
it gives you
Subaru
space.
in tank or the Subaru surge tanks in the engine bay. My buddy at 1320
Mhm.
does that all the time because he also says the saddle tank sucks
Mhm.
for
Yep.
slosh and fitting pumps
Yeah,
and blah
it
blah blah.
does.
So
Yeah.
he buys that radium.
Radium. Yep.
It just drops in the engine bay there where the fill and return is, and
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
interesting. Yeah, that's also great because a lot of people will show up at my dyno with like a 450, and they're just running out on something. So
Yep.
what's neat is you could essentially cut wherever their fuel filter and shit is. You could just add the
Yes.
AEM and then
Yes.
probably add at least 40% more
Yeah.
fuel pump. Wow,
Yep.
that's a great idea because yeah, I tell people I'm like you just need two now. Whoops.
Yep.
So they could just stack one on the outside. That's a great solution. And add another relay, we should say to people because you don't want
Yes.
to.
You don't want to. No.
You just have to say it out loud. You have
You
to
got to
say it
put
out.
the bigger wiring in a relay. Yeah.
Get the golf cart relay, the 80 ampere, and run
Yeah.
fucking 8 to everything. You won't have any
Yeah.
issues. And
Yep.
ground it somewhere not into the sheet metal chassis.
With paint, you gotta get the paint off.
I have learned to do that as well. That's where I bought a clamp and started to learn a lot, like, triple pumps drawing 30 amps, and then you improve the ground and they draw like 43, and you're like, damn, I had 13 to 15 amps just turning into resistance and heat for no reason because I'm a jackass. But yeah, obviously you get more out of the pumps, and yeah, blah blah blah. What was another one? There was another good one here. Shit. I have this guy who asks like 10 questions. Maybe I'll split them up. He's just started listing all of these. I've heard that, I've heard the 3-port will have better resolution than boost control than a 4-port.
Yes.
What kind of resolution difference is there?
Massive.
I mean, that's something we know, but it could be, obviously, he needs a splaining.
I absolutely hate dealing with 4-ports.
Yeah.
Hate it. There's no, if you're doing closed loop boost control with a 4-port, it is damn near impossible unless you clamp your integral gain, like the actual max limit, to something like 1 to 2% of the integral contribution, because that's what's going to drive your closed loop when you're at the target. It's going to keep your duty cycle and manipulate it to get you up to, well, your P is going to get you to the target. Your I is going to hold you at the target. Most of the times with the 4-ports, the integral, if you allow it to have a limit of more than 1-2% adjustment with a 4-port, that thing's going to swing all over the place. A couple percent duty cycle change will give you a couple PSI boost swing. So now your boost is swinging back and forth, going ape shit. You can't get it under control. It's near impossible to try to do it with closed loop control, unless you have a standalone or system that you can clamp your integral, your max output from your integral term on your PID gain. And it's a nightmare. The only time I find that they work well is if you have a really, really low wastegate spring, like a 3-pound spring, and you're trying to get a big, largeable, usable range. You can then usually you can lean into the duty cycle harder and don't see that very unlinear percentage duty cycle to PSI difference. So it's more usable with a really low spring pressure with a 4-port. But the 3-ports just work. Normally what I do, if I need a large range of boost control and I have a good standalone, an Infinity, a Haltech, a Link, a Motec, whatever, I'll run 2 3-ports. And I'll do a 3-port in the traditional top port control, and then I'll do a 3-port as a bleed on the side port that'll only bring in when I want the extra boost to come in. So you're still getting the effect of a 4-port controller, but with 2 3-ports. And when you're not energizing,
touchy.
Oh yeah, you can get it up on boost, and if you want that extra little bit, you enable the side port control and bleed out just a little bit, and it's perfect. So that's what I typically try to do.
Yeah, that's what
don't
everyone's
like
dual 3-ports versus 4-ports trash. I would say that I recommend a 4-port a bunch of times, usually, because it seems like a bunch of the combos, the turbo's a little small and people choke them out faster than you would think. So
high back pressure stuff, yeah.
I say to people, obviously you put like a 3-pounder in, you go very low, and then I don't do closed loop at that point with a 4-port. It's all raw on like my dial-a-booster vehicle speed, and then it's beautiful because you can run like 4 to 26 pounds on half of a 4-port. But yeah, I made a video when Terminator first came out, and I tied like the map sensor into my input because Terminator, for some asshole reason, only has dome, which is stupid as hell. And I showed people how to do that, and then ever since then, people are like, I can't get this to work. And I'm like, yeah, I showed you how to do the feature. And then I had a car where it worked great on, but it's because it was an S475 on a 4.8. It's very slow to respond. It's easier to control. But if you have something that lights, you're going to really struggle with it unless it's raw output. Because, yeah, that happens like 41% to 42% 3 pounds.
Yeah.
They're really 35 to 75 is a wild game.
Yep. No, it's 100%. And that's like I usually tune everything closed loop boost control. I mean, if I'm probably 95% of what I do is closed loop, and a 4-port, I said, like, unless you can clamp that integral term, there's an integral max limit contribution. Unless you can clamp that thing down to
It's
like one,
always gonna
2%,
swing.
you're never going to get it right. It's going to be oscillating everywhere. So yeah, not a fan of 4-port.
They have their place. I like them now.
High
For what
back
I
pressure.
do, and for stuff
Yeah.
like that, yeah. I mean, on a V8, a bunch of the combos have a shit hot side, and then also because you have a V8, I tell people it's nice to be able to turn that thing down to like 375 or 400 tire, and then 840 with one solenoid. And I explain, doing a light spring kills your spool a little bit, blah blah blah.
Mhm.
But a lot of these cars, they're gonna run a fairly shitty tire on a regular road, and
Yeah,
I'm
they're not
like,
going to hook up.
for mile
Yeah.
an hour, it's cool to just be able to go to like a 3 and change, and then swing it up at like 80 miles an
Yeah.
hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then my buddy Chris says I usually have to vary the hertz, and I've done that too. But some cars, like you said, are just that Haltech car I did the other day. I did like 12 hertz to 32 hertz, and did not give a shit. It was
Yeah.
on closed, it was all over. So I did raw
Yeah.
output on that. And then
Yep.
again, they had a 3-port die before they brought it to the dyno, and they had a 4-port. So they said, and I said the same thing, a 3-port on this car would be fantastic for targeting, because they have the Haltech. It's a T56 car, and they set it up for all the gear ratios. So then you can target an amount per gear.
Yep.
And obviously you want that to work. It's like an old stick shift truck. It's going to be garbage without boost by gear.
Yep.
Oh yeah, this guy says, what about dual 3-ports? Well, you already talked about that. He must have missed it.
Yeah. Dual
With
3-ports.
boost pressure as the pressure reference. Yeah, Joe is saying 4-ports are okay situationally, but not for the guy that has an 8-pound spring that wants to run 10. Yeah, I guess that's what people need to hear. But I say that, I think, enough, where I'm like, to gain the resolution, you need to have like a 1-pounder. Because, if you have an 8-pound spring and you want like a small percentage is going to be 20 some pounds.
Yeah.
When you want 8 to 15 or 8 to 18, that's just not smart. So, yeah. Hopefully people hear that. Oh, I think you might have answered this in your video, but let's ask this. When a customer rolls in for tuning, what are things they can do to help for a successful tuning adventure? I think your one is just bitching that dumb people do, which you could watch that and just do the polar opposite, which is probably what he's asking.
Yeah. I
I'm
mean,
gonna have to link that video and paste it in the chat for everybody.
It's I mean, it's like common sense goes a long way with just getting your car right. It's like just making sure you have a tuning cable with you in the car. I mean, yeah, I have tuning cables at the shop, but it's like you have it hooked up. I don't have to spend 10 minutes digging through the car to fit the cable to the ECU because it's buried under the dash. Or, you have things like my dyno got to take off the wheels, having a lug key to take your wheels off so I can get it on the dyno, or just basic mechanical stuff. And just, it's really common sense. I usually like to tell people, if your car can drive down the road, obviously if it's not tuned, you can't drive down the road. But I mean, in terms of like, if your car could drive down the road and make it a few miles down the road, not have a fucking shit fit and die because of the battery's no good, or, overheating or whatever, that's probably okay to bring to an appointment. Now, obviously everybody can't drive their car and get it running that perfect, but it's like, you can't show up with unknowns. Like, you've never started the engine before. It's just not, it's not going to work, So there's a time and the place to sort things out. I mean, when I do like the remote tuning, I do a lot of, people are like, hey, my motor's not even started yet. We can start off, you can load a map in, do some logs. I can take a look at it and make sure that it's safe. Everything looks like it's in order. Then you can start to progress, drive it casually, do your mile break in, look at the logs, check everything over, tune and adjust things as you need. It's probably the best way to go about trying to get to a dyno tune, is to probably have it gone through it in the basic sense of going through with the tuner and logging it and making sure things are right before you show up. That goes a long way. Because if the car starts and runs and it's relatively sorted out, then usually it'll make it through the dyno without catastrophe.
I pasted the rant video. The real cost of modifying your car.
Oh.
I thought there was another one, but that might be the one. I thought there was
I
one
don't know.
about,
There's
like,
a couple.
Yeah, they could just look then.
Yeah.
But yeah. For people that have never tuned, how do you know if you're getting detonation without knock sensors? That's tough. I mean, I would say I don't rely on them much. Most of the cars don't even have them. I will see, diminishing returns, and then after that, like probably pumping loss, and then after that, enough knock to sound like nails in a paint can. That's my favorite.
When you hear that, it's bad.
You're way past.
It's tough to. If you don't have a dyno, the best thing you can do is buy a knock device that you can fit a knock sensor to the block, like a Tuner Nerd, or there's a bunch of other ones. I use the Tuner Nerd because it's relatively cheap. It's a couple $100. It allows you to actually know what's going on. You can read spark plugs, but it's really not practical to do that. If you're trying to sort out a car, like road mapping it, you're not going to be able to pull over every time you get it full throttle and check the spark plugs. It's just not practical. For how cheap a knock monitor device is, $250, $300 with a knock sensor comes with it, and a set of headphones, you can hear it and see what's going on. It's just, it's worth it, from my opinion. But, and I know I could probably dial a motor in without a knock sensor because we've done it so many, especially if you're doing the same combination. But if you can think if you're starting off with an engine, you have no idea what the knock tolerance is on it.
Yeah.
You're like, what the fuck timing can I even get away with? You can sit there and dick with it on the dyno, but if you don't have a dyno, it's like, where do you start?
Yeah, I would say to people, like, if it's a turbo LS car, you could take like one of my tables, make it more conservative and use like a draggy and go till your acceleration stops accelerating and then pull it back. Because it's the same as like track tuning. For most of these cars, I don't think they're like a mid 8-second car on the road. I might be totally wrong, but I'd say like that's the best metric you could get if you have nothing and no other option. Because that'll show you, I know they're extremely accurate. I've been to like my buddy runs World Cup, GTR World Cup, now DCT World Cup. And those guys have them in the car and it's like almost exactly what the scoreboard is. And sometimes it's a little different because the scoreboard averages your mile an hour between the end, like 100 feet or whatever that is, 200 feet. Well, the GPS is your actual top speed. So your mile an hour is more accurate on the draggy, in my opinion, because it's not getting an average number. But yeah, you could do that and do like your 60 to 130. Just don't post them on YouTube or you'll get fines like that guy the other day.
Oh boy.
They're busting everybody's ass. Did you hear about that?
No.
He posts like draggy times all the time, and they like gave him a whole bunch of convictions and citations, and I think they're trying to go hard on him because people are honestly like, you can't be posting that shit all the time. You're literally breaking the law. You can't say in Mexico when there's Pennsylvania road signs and traffic and a guy asking for money. Like, you're just not in Mexico.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, so, and then those people are surprised. They're like, I can't believe this has happened. It's like smoking crack and posting YouTube videos. Anyway, I don't know. Accountability just doesn't fucking exist anymore. Where even was I? Oh, yeah. So, yeah, I would say like a draggy or find someone with a dyno or something, yeah. This was a good one. This guy paid also, but it's also a good question. So if they pay and they want to know something retarded, we still go over it. Because if you paid money, like, you're definitely gonna. I appreciate. They don't have to at all, but it's funny. LS engines, pros and cons and tunability of drive-by-wire versus drive-by-cable on Holley or OEM ECUs. I love wire. That's all I have to say.
I
Not on a
I
stock
like
ECU. I'm not as good. I don't like it because there's too many. Like you are obviously better because you're used to like the torque based ECU. But I love the Holly thing because you're just like do what I want and it does.
yep, yep. I think the problem with the factory ECU, um, you're you can't touch a lot of the drive-by-wire tables to shape the mapping, or you'll piss off the tack module and the car goes into rep, the reduced power mode, and then it's fucked off until you return the ship back to stock. It's just
Yeah.
it's annoying.
Too many
You
checks and
can
balances on that system.
you can so if it's like a Gen 4 drive-by-wire, you can manipulate the virtual torque tables to drive and influence drive-by-wire response. So you can indirectly so if it's a stick car, not an auto car, because you'll piss off the torque, the
Yep.
torque tables and the auto shifting.
6L80E is gonna flare like a bitch.
Yeah, it's gonna go nuts. But if you're a stick car, you can mess with the torque tables to change that mapping without influencing the actual drive-by-wire tables that will put it into rep mode. Um, I would personally always choose drive-by-wire on a standalone whenever possible. It's so nice. The idle control, easy. Like it starts up so much nicer having that just even fixed throttle blade as opposed to a stupid stepper motor, idle control motor that is bullshit. I mean, I don't know. I personally drive by wire for sure.
Yeah, I think it surprises people when I say it a lot. Because what's funny is too, like, I laugh about it because people don't want it because they're like scared of it. And
Yeah,
then I'm like, well, how many drive-by-wire cars do you own? If you own anything newer than like 2010,
yeah,
and then I'm like, how many of those cars have had the throttle stick?
yeah. It doesn't.
Zero. And then
Yeah,
I go, well, how many cable throttle cars have you had or built that had the throttle stick? Well, a lot of them.
yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
where is your argument? And then yeah,
Yeah.
like I had a G35 with an LS and a Holly drive-by-wire, all of that stuff, and it had a LSA on top, pulleyed to critical mass, and it was stick shift in a CD09. It was very stabby. Obviously, it would make
Hmm.
like 17 pounds on a whiff. So putting an exponential curve in there made it drive like my Kia,
Yep, yep.
and I think people they don't realize that. And then
Hmm.
also, if you have a giant throttle, the IAC motor becomes almost useless in some instances.
Yep,
So you
yep,
have you have good hot idle or good cold start and not the others. But then obviously a wire has a gigantic, it'll do whatever the hell you want.
yep.
So and then I always, again, I think I missed this on my first wrap around. People have a beautiful engine bay, beautiful intake manifold, the ugliest fucking cable and cam in the world. Like they will come out of their windshield and come down into this bracket on a Holly high ram that's color matched to the whole car, and it looks like dog shit. But
Yeah,
they won't do a wire that just clip.
yeah,
Yeah. And what's cool is when I convince people to do wire and like you remote on to a Holly, you're like, you set the stop at like 15%, fire the car, it's idling high, and you're like ding 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 ding,
yep,
and like you can just all of the idle stuff without going and whacking stuff with a screwdriver and bending the throttle stop because
yep,
the torque 3-bit is fucking destroyed on
yep,
all of those. Yeah, they're always like,
yeah,
I can't turn the screw, and I'm like, oh, here, and I push it open and shove channel locks in and just bend the
yeah,
tab. They're like, you can do that, and I'm like, yeah, you can do whatever the hell you want. This is America.
yeah. Yeah, drive by wire for sure. I've been on the import stuff, like that's not drive by wire, it's cable. Switch it over. I hate dealing with stepper motors, like they're fucking garbage.
Yeah, why?
And
Just people. I don't think people realize it until you show them. And then there's
yeah,
always that argument where they're like, a cable's just fast. And I love that a guy did a video. I think it was Haltech or similar, and he shows like the opening rate versus a cable
yeah,
yanking. It's
yeah.
way faster than
Oh yeah,
humanly
it's
possible
faster.
on it. I don't know how you could think it's not, but
Yeah,
that's like carburetor guys that just won't admit defeat. And I think
yeah,
a lot of people's experience, obviously, I explain all this. Their experience with drive-by-wire is their 2011 pickup that doesn't go over 20% throttle until 3,000 RPM for
yeah,
keeping abuse down for like
yep,
burnouts and dumb shit. It keeps their warranty claims, way down with you people not doing that. So
Yeah.
they're like, this sucks and I can feel it. Well, no shit, it's not giving you throttle. Of course you can feel it, but I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm pissing into the wind here for people that don't want it. But yeah, I'm getting down to my pre asked questions here. So if you guys want to start asking, I just drill the butterfly. Well, yeah, sometimes you have to put some asshole numbers into some cars. Sometimes you have to drill it. Like I know, Chris and I were talking about some of those Gen 3 cars. People always talk shit on drilling them. I'm like, it fucking works sometimes. You could put some asshole numbers in the airflow or the running airflow. Or but why you could just drill a hole too, like instead of giving
and get it back in line.
Asshole numbers. And then like Chris says, some of those F-body style cars that you can't get the TPS below or above a certain amount.
Yeah, I think it's like 83.7 or 0.83 volts, something like that.
Like
it won't go into it won't relearn the idle, and then
it'll always show a percentage above 0, and it's fucked. Like if you drill a hole, it doesn't do that. And I think early on I would just drill a hole because that's what people would tell you to do, and that's what I learned. They're like, oh, if you put LS1 Tech had a chart, like if you put this cam and use this drill bit, because then it would use all the stock tables with increased airflow physically.
Makes sense. Yep.
And it just, I'm like, people used FMUs for a long time too, guys. It's okay to brutalize something. Whatever.
I've had the opposite where I was trying to dial a car in that had the blade drilled, and it was just way too much, and we couldn't turn it down enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like
what you do is you drill it out big enough to smack a pop rivet in it. I've done it.
Oh, that's true. I didn't think about that.
You just knock a pop rivet in it and start drilling more holes. And if you fuck up, you put another pop rivet.
There you go.
They don't go anywhere. People are scared about a pop rivet, but they'll have Chinese screws that are completely loose in their 92 millimeter drive-by cable on their Holly High Ram. What's your opinion on water methanol? No E85 in my area.
Water meth works well, and it depends on the kit, depends how you're implementing it. It depends on a lot of factors, where the nozzle is, what your water meth blend is going to be. I'm a fan of it as long as the kit that you use has a fail-safe strategy that you can tie into a standalone, so you can cut power output or implement a rev limiter in case you get a low level condition or some other fault, in the system. I like water meth. You can definitely get away with a large margin and boost in timing. It's not as good as ethanol, but it's definitely pretty substantial difference in power output on pump gas. The only thing that I can say long-term that I've seen is distribution through an intake manifold. You do get uneven wear over 30, 40, 50,000 miles. If you tear a motor down, you look at the actual bores and pistons, you will see a definite wear difference on an engine that lives on water meth. It's the nature of it, just the distribution through the intake manifold.
Engine Masters did an episode on that, showing how wildly different the cylinder is too. But yeah, I have most of my early combos were like 18 pounds of boost with windshield washer fluid hooked up to the stock thing, because you could, then it says low washer fluid, and you're like, oh. And I'd put in the blue shit, and then later on we started doing what I call Prestone piss water. It's the yellow Prestone stuff that, and people are always like, well, what do I know as a higher alcohol content? And I go, put it in your mouth. If it burns like Listerine, it's high. If it doesn't, it's not.
Put it in your mouth.
Yeah, I'm like,
you can check the label. Maybe they say.
A lot of times it's not very accurate, or
that's true.
I don't know. I'm like, just. You've put worse things in your mouth, dude. Just fucking take a swish of that, and if it burns your mouth, it's high alcohol.
Oh, boy.
Anyway, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I have too simple of a solution for people sometimes. Well, people are asking, like, because popular people are commenting, Alky control, I would say. This says Alky, Kit, Snow, or AEM. Well, there's also Alky control, but...
I use the Aquamist and the AEM. I don't know. I haven't looked at a lot of the other brands.
I just know that they have switches.
Yeah, the big thing for me is going to be the fail-safe strategy. That's the biggest thing with a kit. As long as it has an output that you can tie to an engine management or tie it to like a relay to turn off a boost solenoid, for example. As long as you have that in the system, and it's progressive. You don't want to just on off because that just fucking you turn it on and it's just too rich for a second. You turn it off and it's just too rich for a split second. The progressives are way better in terms of having more consistent air fuel delivery. The best way to control it is to just integrate it into the standalone, use a solid state relay, directly drive the actual pump itself, use a tank that has a level sensor, integrate that into the standalone, build a rev limiter strategy around that in case it triggers. So you're controlling everything through the standalone and being able to, essentially ramp the duty cycle up and to have the alky spray come in. And, that's the best way to do it. But standalone has to have the ability to have a lot of inputs, outputs tied into a single strategy to work together.
Yeah.
So
Let it fly. Get the bullshit kit with a hob switch. Let it eat on that washer blue. I did that for years.
Yeah, it works. Simple works,
Yeah. Just tune it fat and spray that bitch on top of it. If it doesn't work, you're probably going to be okay. I don't know. I guess people are just awful with wiring, and I just don't have those issues. Even when I would do it and it would look ugly, it was always functional. So I never had issues where shit doesn't work. I don't know what it is, but because a lot of my friends are like, "Oh, this car is a nitrous kit. 99% of them don't work." And I can understand that. Like nobody wires anything right, but I'm like, it's easy. It's so easy to use, and I've never had it not work. So the only
Arming
reason
switch and relay.
yeah, like yeah, that's the stuff I've learned about is like a automatic car with a big wet kit and a big converter and just a micro switch on the throttle, like dink,
Oh, even easier. Yeah,
dink. Yeah, like you could just run the high, and you didn't even need a relay if you didn't
yeah.
want to, because those are high voltage and current switches.
Yep.
So like, it would just turn on. What's this? There are 3 people on this planet that are willing to put that much work into anything. He's talking about your water meth kit, my buddy Joe from Tempest. Weed sprayer taped to the intake pipe. I've also heard of my Mustang friend who's been doing Mustang shit for a long time. He said there was a kit where it would just take boost pressure and fill a sealed container, so it would 1-to-1. The boost would just push the meth out.
Huh.
I'm like, damn, that's simple. Holy shit,
That's super simple.
I'm like, wow. So it just, he was telling me about it, and I wasn't getting how simple it actually was.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he's like,
Makes
no,
sense.
it would just, he's like, bloop. And I'm like, really? I'm like, are you shitting me? Like, or is that real? He's like, no, that's what we did for a long time.
Huh.
Oh, this guy's saying, Nismo Freak is asking, there's one I want to ask, and then I'll go back to his. Because I like learning about Max ECU. Chris here goes, what's your opinion on Max ECU race for a 800, all-wheel horsepower 4-cylinder? I'm weighing my options, and it seems to be the best value for money in regards to advanced controls. Are there any other alternatives?
Link G4X, like an Extreme or a Fury box. Price-wise, they're probably comparable. Another really good ECU is M-Tron. Not very popular here in the States. M-Tron is equivalent of a Motec M1. It's super configurable, like OEM level calibrating if you want to do it, torque-based modeling, airflow-based modeling. It depends it just depends what you want to do. They all will function capability-wise of what they can actually do. They're pretty similar. Max is a great ECU. The only issue with Max is that their customer support is awful. It's awful. If you have a question, good luck. They do get back to you. It's just painstakingly slow. And there's that language barrier with them too as well. But their stuff works.
Swedish?
I believe that is.
They're Vikings.
Yeah.
Somewhere up and over there.
Yeah, they're I've had some sorting out issues with a K series car on Max, and it was painstakingly slow to try to work through it with them. But the functionality of the software is great, and what it can do is it works. I've used Max on plenty of stuff, and for the price, it's definitely good. But you do have other alternatives. My go-to is the Link stuff. I usually that's usually what I.
Yeah, that's interesting that you like that. I'm gonna have to look into it since you like it. There's got to be reasons. Well, like everything you mentioned earlier, if they miss that, at some point we talked about how much you love Link for the economics and functionality for.
The hardware is badass too.
Hmm.
The stuff just works. Like there's almost never any QC problems with their stuff.
Someone had mentioned that earlier in the chat that they've done like a million Link things and no one's ever had a damn issue.
No,
Which is nice.
Anytime I've ever had a problem, it's always been the harness of the car. It's always been something, not the Link. So.
And Nismo Freak is asking PID control for dummies, if that can be something easily explained. I know it can be as hard or as easy as you want it to be.
It depends on what you're controlling, but I mean, in general, proportional drives you to the target. Derivative is going to keep your proportional drive to the target under control. It's going to act as a stop or a brake coming up to the target. So your proportional drives you there quickly. The derivative is going to be limiting you, depending how you tune it, to the target. And then integral is going to what holds you at the target. Now, they all work in conjunction with each other at any given time. But in general, if you're talking about boost control, proportional integral is all you need to make it work. If you're talking about drive-by-wire control, traditionally it's going to be integral derivative to make that work. There is proportional that you use. It just depends on what you're trying to do. If you have something that's a fast rate of change in movement, so if you're implementing spark timing for idle control, you'll be using proportional derivative together. Proportional speeds the timing correction up to the target, getting you to your idle error target, and then the derivative is going to hold you and try to keep you from overshooting that target. So it kind of depends on what you're trying to control. So boost control, it's usually proportional integral. But the proportional drives you to the target, integral holds you at the target, derivative acts as your brake and not letting you overshoot the target. Simplest way to probably describe it.
Yeah, I've always that's interesting that it's, well, like you said, it's situational. I've always done because you could do it in every direction. Like I've heard it explained, and I've done it a bunch of times, where you just type in a P number until it comes up to like your target boost. So say you want 10, it'll go 15, 5, 15, 5. And then
you hit saturation.
Yeah. And
yeah.
Then you would put in like, you want to get there but not oscillate it too much. Or it depends, right? Like if you want it to chase a target fast, but then you move your integral to get that loop smaller, and then the D is the dampener for that.
Yep.
But like you were saying, some other stuff, you only need 2 of those 3, and that makes sense too.
Yep. The best way to tune it is if you have no idea what the circuit you're trying to control, for like boost control, for example. You bring your P term up with your integral and derivative zeroed out, and you do that until you get oscillation. Then you back your P value down. You basically reach a saturation point, and then you start bumping your I up. And then you do that until you get oscillation in your signal. You bring that down, that's your saturation point. And typically you can make most anything work with just proportional integral, but you drive it up to the saturation, then you bring it down about 10, 20%. And then that will actually make it stable and control in that routine. So that's just a really basic way to do it.
That's what I've always done. I know enough that I've messed with them so much that I throw numbers at it. It's hard to explain to people exactly what it is, but at this point I'm like, oh, it's slow to target. I just start smashing some, and I can tell right away. It's confusing to try to explain it to people, but after you've done it a bunch, you don't even do that usually. You're like, oh, a tiny bit of oscillation.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
someone has a good one. This is like something I've been messing with recently. Do you ever pulse with fuel pumps, like a big external or
Yes.
something?
Yes. With a solid state. Yep.
What's your go-to solid state? That's my question.
Depends what I'm trying to
A
control.
big ass fuel pump, like a 4303.
That's gonna take. There's an 80 ampere solid state. I can't remember the part number that I've used. It's not a particular brand. I'd have to dig up if you're gonna buy it from somebody, it would be like labeled under someone's part
Honeywell,
number.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know a lot of parts that are fancy as shit and labeled somewhere, like a
Yes,
Haltech, it's 150, and you can
yes,
find it on somewhere. It's a Honeywell switch for $17 for
yes,
HVAC
yes.
or something.
Yeah. No, it literally is that. I can't remember, but it's an 80 ampere, and
That'd be nice.
yeah, and you can do it. I can't remember the continuous specs on it, but it's legit and it works. Um,
You have to
but yeah,
email it to me or something if you dig it up
yeah, I got to
sometime.
look through my notes. I'm sure I have it.
Someone says here that they use like a Mitsubishi. I'm nervous about a lot of that PWM stuff is slow. It has built-in softener. Like you
Mhm.
can smack it with 90%, and it still takes 20% to swing 20 seconds
Mhm.
to bring the fan from. And I'm like, if you have a fuel pump and it needs to bring fuel in, you don't want 20 seconds to.
No, it has to be so if I'm trying to control like a fan, um, or something else that's solid state driven, Holly actually has a good. They have a nitrous one, a solid
Yes,
state.
I was gonna say
That's
that's
what I use.
Devin likes that too. Devin Vanderhoof, he does a lot of car wiring, and he's like, I don't really trust any of them because this
Yep.
one's works, doesn't melt
Yes.
anything, blah blah
Yes.
blah.
I've even used that one for fuel pump control for like in tank stuff. So and
Oh,
it
the
works.
Continental controller is an OEM fuel pump controller for brushed pumps. MSD makes the dual channel thing. Oh, interesting. I have that MSD brick. I always wanted to try it on my friend's car. It's
Is it like the four? Is it four of them?
Yeah, they
Yeah.
sent it to me and I've used it for a bunch of things. I've even used it on like fans, but you get a
Hmm.
bunch of coil whine on a lot of things, even changing the frequency a lot. And
Hmm.
someone told me it's because the Holly caps at 1,000 hertz.
Hmm.
If you could run like 8,000 or 10,000, it wouldn't
Hmm.
whine. But if you can get over the whine, it did work fine for me. I always wanted to try it with like a 4303 and see how well
Hmm.
it would do. But now I got a pump from Magnafuel that has a PWM controller built in. There's 3 studs on the
Yep.
pump. So I'm gonna try that in my Fairmont. So that's cool. It's just built in, and you just
Yep.
smack it with a PWM wire. I'm like, well, that's way better than that. I tried using Hella relays to PWM a bunch of 450s in my
Mm-mm.
latest Mustang project, and
They
it
don't.
did not like that.
No, they don't like it. Yep.
So it has to be a certain, like one of those big pumps, in my opinion.
Yep.
It would be okay with that. Do you ever run into what's a pump that you've done, like a 4303? I would say that's most of the people I know that are wanting to pulse is they have a 4303 and they just don't want it screaming and boiling fuel all the time.
Hmm.
So have you done one of those and have you used a particular thing? Because I bet below a certain percent, just like boost controllers and everything else, it just isn't running enough to flow correctly, like 30%.
The the pumps that I usually control are in tank stuff with with a pulse modulated solid state relay. I haven't done any like the big pump stuff, and if I have done if it has been a big pump, it's been paired with a controller
Like an
that's
aftermarket controller that's meant to do it.
right, and then you can drive through the controller. So yeah, I don't have
I wonder how many
any.
amps the nitrous, the NOS solid state Holly relay.
I think it does 30 or 40 amps continuous.
Well, that's not bad for a pump. A lot of those pumps don't really.
That's why if you do a single pump of one relay per pump, you're good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man, Holly charges $115 for
It
it.
used to be half that
It
price.
used to be like 75 when I would
Yeah.
look it up.
Yep.
Yeah, geez. I bet that's just a part you could probably find somewhere, but
Maybe.
yeah, that's
I
pretty
haven't been
good.
able to find it. Yeah.
40 amp maximum current draw, which is kind of nice because you more than likely you're never sitting at 40 amps for a long
No.
time, even if you are. So
Yep.
even if you are running like 45 through this bitch, it's going to be faster than an 8-second car. So you're not really going to be, unless you're land speed racing, you don't really have to worry about it.
Yeah.
I always wanted to try one of those $10 China ones with the giant heat sink on it, just to see if it would last. I know they get hot. We use them for bumping in like trans brakes, and they work amazing. But I bet if you hook that up, I mean, they say 40 amp, but I bet that thing will melt at 10 amps.
It's probably continuous. That's not gonna do it.
No, spike 40.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't care to run the brake and bump in because you're not using it for any time. By the time that solenoid would burn up, your tranny is toast.
Yep.
From sitting on it, but yeah. Do you guys pair a flyback diode with your solid state relays for a fuel pump? Specifically brushed?
Yes, it should have one.
I would say most of the relays have it built in. Am I dumb? Some of those relays have one ways built in. At least that's what it depends on the manufacturer, but I believe my wiring guys have said that a relay is supposed to have a one way.
I think the Holly does have it. I think that the one from Holly has it.
It won't go backfeed, yeah, as far as I know. Just like they said, the Chinese relays don't really have it, but a decent brand name relay. That's why, because I said, what's the significance between like the 30 pole and the output pole? I've swapped them and nothing happens. And he's like, well, if it's not a shit relay, it won't do that.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, okay. Right. Are you saying all my relays are shit? Everything PWM should have flyback, in my opinion. Yeah, you guys are fancy. I'm just gonna touch them together. All right. Been listening to all these. Oh, this is a good one. If you had a drag car with only a Terminator X with its 4 in and 4 out, what sensors and outputs would you say is a must?
Excluding the essentials, map, CPS, air temp, coolant.
Well, no, it's just because all of that, yes, but the Terminator has user assignable 4 in and 4 out.
Yeah, four additionals.
Yeah, so he's just saying, the car is running and everything, but I have a Terminator, so what should I do for 4 inputs and 4 outputs?
Fuel pressure, oil pressure.
Well, those are freebies.
Are they? Oh, yeah.
So you basically have 6. I mean, so this is 4 and 4 on the Terminator.
Is it turbo?
I would assume. Does he say that? He doesn't say. Obviously, we'll say both then, because obviously you'd probably want a boost controller.
Yep, boost controller for sure.
Yeah.
It depends how fancy you want to get and what you're trying to log. I mean, it's turbo. You could do a turbo speed sensor, exhaust manifold pressure. That's typically the two that I like to always keep an eye on because you can tell what's actually going on with the turbo if you're over spinning it, or if you're getting to the inefficiency with the turbo. Man, there's so many additional sensors you could run. Coolant pressure.
You're in a funny spot because you're used to having way more than 4 and 4, right?
Yeah. We're logging like an extra 10, 20. So we put a sensor on everything if possible.
Yeah, that covers it. I always say to people, like, if it's classically what I do is stock bottom end LS drag car. So I always like doing flex because it's in my area. So I like to do
flex fuel.
Yeah, flex, and then if it's a stock bottom end car, it's cool to have coolant pressure because you can see when you're running into a problem, and then like back pressure usually, and then your decide what you want to do for your other one, but I would say increasingly coolant pressure and back pressure are nice to look at, because you can be like, why is this happening? Oh, I'm 2-1 on my boost and EMAP. Okay, well then you don't have to guess like what's happening. I would say turbo speed sensor is way out of most people that are using that, because it's like $175 for a turbo speed sensor. But one thing that's cool is my buddy Cameron with that Crown Vic, he has twins, and he did twin speed sensors, twin O2 sensors, twin speed sensors. It's really cool to see like the turbos are within 200 RPM of each other at times, and you're like, oh, this is cool to look at.
I usually like to look at compressor mapping. So if you're going to either know where the turbo will fail, like Borg Warner turbos, they'll tell you don't overspin past 120,000 RPM or you'll get failure. So you can, you're keeping an eye on that. And then you can also go to a compressor map, knowing manifold pressure, knowing your barrel pressure, knowing your speed. You can actually look up what the turbo is flowing. Are you in the efficiency range? Right? What's your EMAP doing? Are we getting, is it the EMAP rising because the turbine compressor is having a mismatch issue? Is it actual exhaust pressure picking up from, exhaust side, choking, or,
Who has a good CAN IO module? Well, that's depending on if you have a Fuel Tech or a Hall Tech, you have 75 CAN modules. I always laugh about that. My buddy that does wiring, he does like a Hall Tech car. Yeah. And it's a Hall Tech, and then it's like an array of boxes, like 2 wideband things, a sensor IO box, or whatever, like 6 boxes. And then he does a Dominator car, and it's just a Dominator.
Yeah, it makes it easy.
Oh, Cameron said he was at 81,000 RPM maximum so far at like 26 pounds.
So the next thing would be, depending on the turbo manufacturer, if you have a compressor map. Some of them you can't get, like precision stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say when you were bringing up like a map, and I'm like,
it depends who you get.
Yeah.
Garrett, Borg Warner, you can get, you can get maps.
I've heard the same thing, like when that Yaris GR came out, and immediately Motec made I don't know what happened there. Someone made that happen, but Yaris GR comes out and they have Motec plug and play already. And I'm like, wow, okay. Because they were tuning it, and I'm like, wow, they figured that out fast. And the Australian guys were like, yeah, it has a M1 on it that's plug and play. And I'm like, that seems sudden and strange for a Toyota Yaris.
Somebody probably involved with Motec
they were going to do development anyway, so
they probably were ahead of it. It's probably the similar cam programming from another car,
I'm sure,
and they probably had a lot of that data, because that's the only way it would happen.
And then they had like speed sensors and everything, and they're like, yeah, we're making just enough power to keep it under terminal, and set safeties on it, and they were looking at all that, and I'm like, you have turbo speed sensor on a Toyota Yaris. It was just blowing I'm like, first of all, a Motec, second of all, turbo speed sensors. But yeah, they were doing so much development that all of that was important. So it just makes me laugh. Like, it's like someone bringing you a B series car that has a turbo speed sensor.
I've done it.
You'd be like, okay, why? But like I don't know. Yeah. At this point, you've done everything, so it wouldn't surprise. That's why people are like, what's your favorite or weird whatever? And you're like, it's all weird and it's all cool.
Yeah.
Can you explain what happened yesterday, or is that a thing you don't want to say?
Fuck my life. Yesterday was a disaster. First guy shows up 45 minutes late. I had 4 cars yesterday. So first guy shows up 45 minutes late. Is a drift car. I go to put the car on the dyno on the main line, and it has the hub adapters you have to bolt on. He has a staging brake set up for a drift car. So he has his normal caliper, and then he has his handbrake caliper to get it to slide. Well, those calipers hit the adapter for the main line. So he had to take all the back brakes apart. So he's already late. Then he's fucking around with the back brakes trying to take them apart. So we get on the dyno. Then we get on the dyno, and we tune it, whatever, and it went fairly smooth. It wasn't. I've already tuned the car. It was like a retune to check everything, you refresh the motor. I'm already like 30, 40 minutes late to the next car. I get on at the next car is a Type R, a newer Type R, and there's a flex fuel kit on it. And I tuned the car, I think, a year and a half ago, and it was just pump gas. And you have to update the calibration file when you do a firmware update with the Honda. And for whatever reason, the Honda decided to go in and it has all kinds of limiters for the commanded turbo pressure. So there's tables based on barrel pressure and temperature. For whatever reason, those were raised up. I had tuned it. It was making the boost I wanted on the bigger turbo, and everything was good. And when it did the firmware update, those two tables went back to stock values. So now I can't get the commanded boost that I had last year, or the year before when I tuned it. I'm sitting there doing pull after pull. The ECUs are Bosch ECUs in those newer Hondas. They take 8-10 minutes to flash each time. So I'm sitting there trying to troubleshoot this problem where a file that I knew worked doesn't work before we even did the flex fuel. As I pissed away like 2 hours trying to deal with this. And I finally get the car, whatever, mapped out. It was late. I started on the next car late. It was a twin turbo G35 on UpRev. And the car was tuned at some point like 10 years ago. Car's drivable. Everything's fine with it. I asked the guy, I'm like, okay, what MAF sensor do you have? Because you can swap the MAF sensors. The stock ones only go to about 300 horsepower. And what injectors? I don't know what MAF sensor. I don't know the injectors. I'm like, dude, come on. Well, with UpRev, you can't read the original file that was tuned on.
Oh, shit.
You can only start off with a base. I download with the way UpRev works. You have to download from the base directory. You look up their ROM code. You go online, you download it. You start off with that as your base. So you're starting off with a stock file every time. And then you have to put all your variables in there, injector, MAF scaling, all that. I set the file up, guessing at the injector data. He thinks he had 600s, but they could be 900 cc or thousands. He has no idea. He doesn't know, but he thinks he has a different MAF sensor, like an aftermarket one. I'm like, dude, you're fucking killing me. So I work it out so I get the car to run, but the starting was weird, and the power was just being weird and inconsistent on the dyno. And I thought everything was good with it. And it made similar power to what it made when it was tuned before. So he leaves. I'm on the next car. That car didn't have a working map sensor or TPS sensor. And we had to find the sensor ground wasn't hooked up to the map sensor, and the car's harness, custom harness. It's already now like 7:00. Like I'm already like over it. Like I started at like 8 something in the morning. I was there at the shop at 8 something in the morning. Next thing you know, that I'm finishing this guy's Supra. The G35 comes back. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, what's up, man? And he's like, car runs like shit. I'm like, all right, let's try to figure it out. And I'm thinking it's one thing. We're like flashing and trying to fix it. And long story short, it was a corrupted ROM. Mm-hmm. So the ROM file that I had from UpRev on the directory was bad. And no matter what, it
from the manufacturer.
So it's like 8:30 at night, and I'm putting the car back on the dyno, and I won't, I don't ever stay that late. I was there to like 10 o'clock. I had to remap the whole car again. And starting off with a new file, it tuned fine. Like it would start normal. It would make the power and spool up normal. Like there was all this shit. It was doing properly. The second time around. It was all based on a bad ROM. I chased my tail in it. It was awful. It was awful. Like it's basically tuned the car twice in the same day. Like
I was like, did I piss Jeff off? What,
No.
And then you were like, I had a fucking nightmare day. I didn't even.
Dude, I was not happy. So yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, it's 11:30. We're already at 4 hours.
Oh wow.
Is it your bed? Questions are slowing down. People are dropping out because it's 11:30.
Yeah.
So I've never put myself under that many pressure to do that many cars in a day. I give myself a week to make sure a car is good.
Oh boy.
This is Joe Simpson says this is exactly why I quit scheduling more than one car a day.
I usually am good. I haven't had this happen like ever. Usually I'm good, but that bit me in the ass yesterday.
I can usually really iron out 2 cars in 8 hours, at least what it's worth for. And
It dep- it depends. Like so like what you're doing is there's a lot more kind of going back and forth into troubleshooting. If I'm doing 4 or 5 cars a day, I've either set them up remotely.
it can't be troubleshooting, yeah.
No, fuck no. These cars run like so they'll be remotely sorted out before they show up, or it's like the easy stuff where it's like a flash tune for a bolt-on NA car. Like, I mean, you can hour and a half. I know how long it takes me to do it. It's like so.
Yeah, if it starts, it's pretty much agreed that it's going to be like a 4 hour thing. And if it's more than that, we just have to, it's like a homework assignment. You can tell right away if something's going to be
Yep.
good or bad. But every now and then I get one that's like, it does well, and then it doesn't do well. And then you fix something and it starts to, so you want to finish it. You don't want to be like, well, you're fucked, or you have to come again. But, so you try to, but yeah, I would say, a lot of my appointments, we can get through a lot, but some of it's homework. It's like the first time someone built a car. That's what I am. I'm like the gateway drug, right? People have to have their cocaine in order to get to you, but people don't know what they want to snort when they come to me. So I'll be like, this is a little bit wrong, whatever, but we can make $550 and you can drive it for a year and your engine was $200. Who gives a shit? What is this? He says, you explain my week Monday through Friday. Yeah, like my buddy Hunter says, all my customers are newbies. Yeah, I don't mind doing that. A lot of my friends are kind of snobs where they're like, everything has to be right. And I get it. Like their time is worth money, or they have a shop, or we talk about that too in the radio shows. Because I'll do shit and people are like, why can't a shop do that? I'm like, they can't. We try to explain it that you cannot do that. And it's a hobby for me, and I don't mind. It's pretty much understood from my videos that like, I'm just I'm not a professional at all, but I can get you rolling. I do a decent job in my opinion, but yeah, blah blah blah. So I like giving people like a whole list of stuff to do, because a lot of them can't get mad at these people because that's the car's done and they know nothing else, and they're like, well, I don't even know if it does run because blah blah blah. Everybody says you really know your stuff. My buddy Cameron says, Jesus Christ, you do tune everything, because you're talking about like, all these flash things and up revs. And
oh boy, yeah.
It's tough to all have in your brain, that's for sure. That's why I stopped doing. I'll do some stuff for fun, like if I know the person or they're a friend of a friend. Like this year I did a bunch of ECU I started doing like a bunch of VR6 cars. Turbo VRs and like ECU master plug and play. I tuned early this year. I did a R32 with a RB25 on an ECU master. I was like, oh, this isn't. I kind of like that because it has like the live data log, and you can pause it, and if you click on it, it shows the part of the fuel table and stuff where you're paused while it's running, and then you can just hit resume. I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then I did some garbage stuff that's proprietary Volkswagen stuff. What is that? That Kevin Black bullshit.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yep, everybody hates that guy, and I can tell from the ECU package and stuff. He sells you that, and then he disappears.
Yep, that's what I've heard. Yeah,
100%. Like, 10 people are like, I bought all this, and that was it. I had nothing else. And so I did that software. I did a bunch of. So some guy in Pennsylvania here sells plug and play Megasquirt stuff for VRs that plug right into the socket. I was like, damn, who is this? He exists here? What? And then other stuff I've done is like plug and play Microsquirt for VRs. I think that same guy does it. So yeah, a bunch of that, because a lot of people won't touch that, and I'm like, cool, let's try. I don't care.
That's the way I used to always be, just open mind,
Yeah, after a while it's painful. Oh, I did a Volkswagen, a turbo air-cooled Bug with a Holly sniper on it, like a 2-barrel sniper. That was cool.
Huh.
It was difficult. It had like a lot of crazy MAF signal. I'm like, we need to jam a inline fuel filter on this bitch or something, you know.
Yeah. Hmm.
But yeah, what nothing else, I think. Have you ever experienced the manifold temperature fuel correction on an MS3 pulled too much fuel? No. And if it is, just flatline that bitch.
Yeah, you'd have to just scale it yourself.
Just trim it out.
Yeah.
Have you ever experienced? A lot of cars, well, the stock ECU car will really do that bad. Like, because I used to move the IAT sensor into the intake. There's that evap hole, and even on my wiki from 15 years ago, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I show a thing where I'm like, put this drill bit through, and then just hammer the sensor in lightly with like a dead blow. Like, get the rib sensor from like a V6 car with the 3-wire MAF and the 2-wire IAT into the rubber. You can just drill a hole and then bop it in slightly, and then if you look in the throttle body, it's like right in line. I'm
Mm.
like, oh, that works great. But in an open loop speed density turbo car, if you get it nice and hot and you're in traffic and the intake temperatures start flying up, my buddy Chris or someone explained it to me. It's like a gas law table that HP Tuner
Yes.
doesn't let you change. The
Yes.
car will slowly lean out to oblivion and shut off.
Yep.
But at least
Yeah,
in
it's
MS3, you can change that.
it's any of the VE stuff, any of the true airflow model, Gen 3, Gen 4, all that. The air temperature, even in standalones, the ones that like an Infinity, for example, they scale everything based on the actual air temp. It's built into your the estimated airflow coming from your VE. It's built into that, so it's air charge. It's part of the actual equation,
Hmm.
so it's fed into that constantly. So yeah,
Do y'all tune third gens? My buddy cameras. Depends on what's in it.
third
Uh,
gen, GM,
yeah,
yeah,
third gen Camaros, Mr.
yeah.
Mullet shit. This is a good one for you. I've never used a fast IAT sensor, but he's asking what's the best fast IAT sensor?
There's a motorsport one. I can't recall the name of it.
The little one?
It's like 200-300 bucks. It works really well.
Hmm.
I can't recall the name of it off the top of my head.
What's the best fast IAT sensor that doesn't immediately heat soak? I've seen some
Well,
crazy stuff like at DCT World Cup and stuff. My friend that has the Dark Hurricane, the Prime Cuts Chop Shop, that was doing the wheelies, like he was like 1320 poster boy. His name's Jordan Martin, but he had that. It's the AMS Hurricane that was like wheeling through first and second gear and shit. I was looking at that car. You probably know all about it, but it had like IAT sensors in the air to waters, like super tiny, like a rubber eraser on a pencil. I'm like, damn, like how much does that cost? Like I was like, I've never seen that, so it probably costs $500.
yeah, usually the good fast response stuff is like 200-300 bucks. I can't remember who makes the.
He's
It's
saying
like escaping me at the time.
Sile Tech or Sly Tech? I don't know. I know of the Motion one, but then what's funny is I don't think that's if there's a delay, you already understand the delay. You don't
Hmm.
in a drag car, you already know when you lift, it's you see 220 through the trap, but then it carries on to 275. Like
Mm.
you already know that. You don't really need to see it fly up and down. And I don't know. For a sensor like that, part of me's like the fueling doesn't change that much with that radical of a temperature, so there's no need to see it that fast. But that's my boring turbo LS junkyard car thoughts.
It depends. I mean, if your sampling rate on your logging is, you can sample it fast enough and you do have a fast response then, so you can pick it up quick. It's just going to depend on, you know,
Well, I understand
what you're
too. There's
sampling at.
cars that go 4.0 need it to be fast
Mm.
because you need more of
Yeah,
that data, right? If you have a 4.0 car, the IAT might change like 20 degrees,
yeah,
and if you have a fast one, it might be 200 degrees,
yeah.
just because of how short the window is. But I'm not there.
Yeah.
I'm not that guy. You're not that guy. You ever hear that thing? You're not that guy, pal. I'm that guy. That's what I was saying about the fast temp. Yeah. All right. Well, I would say we just cut it off. It's almost midnight, and we're running out of Who's still
Yeah.
on? We still have 80 people watching. Jeez, what the hell are you
Oh,
guys
boy.
doing on a Friday night? All right, well, it was awesome having you
Yeah,
on.
man. Yep.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for
No problem.
everybody watching, even though I biffed the audio for 12 minutes. I kept it exciting. I should have just been like, we can hear, why can't you guys for the rest of the show? No. Yeah. All right, well, maybe we'll have you on it now. We'll definitely try to get everybody on again. Like I said, this year I want to actually do want to adhere to at least one person a month. I slacked. So, yeah, that's it. Everybody,
Alright.
thanks for joining in. Thanks, Jeff.
Yep, no problem.
See you later. Bye.
Say it.
All right, I am out of here.